Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Eren Was Ghidorah? Ekamikami64 wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. We found it, deep in an abandoned mine. The Eldians restorationists looked around a vast cave in amazement, filled with ruins from a people even older than Eldia. We never really knew what we found. Before them was a giant pool of a black oil-like substance that glowed with spotted lights of azure and gold. Some of us called it the Lake of Death. They set up a hidden base within the tomb, studying the strange substances collected in the pool, especially Grisha. We felt something there. A pull. Like a memory we had all forgotten. No matter what Grisha did, it would not dilute, evaporate, or change in any way. It was just there. We thought it had to be related to the Titans, to Ymir herself. What else could it be? Then one day Grisha stared down into the pool. And within the blackness he saw his sister. He saw Freya crying and being ripped apart by dogs. He saw the man who did it. He saw his parents who tried to ignore that it ever happened. He saw everything in this world he ever hated. I came in there one day and Grisha? Hate swallowed him whole. He fell in. Everyone rushed to the edge, Grice and Dina first among them. The lights of the oily pool dimmed ominously. And when he came out, a great golden beast emerged, roaring and wrathful as it pulled itself out of the pool. But he only had 2 heads. Then just as suddenly he vanished in a burst of lightning. Grisha lay collapsed on the floor, his comrades rushing to help him. Grisha thought we had our ace against Marley. No, we all did. The smile on his face wasn't hate though. It was relief. It was amazement. It was hope. So we tried it as well. And one by one each of them went into the pool. All of us. Except for Dina, she was special for some reason. It didn't work for all of us. Some emerged in disappointment. Most of them turned into something like me. Others leaped forth in other forms, like a winged serpent or a bat-like creature. Only Grisha got that one though. And for once, Grisha was confident that they could take back their lives, their future, and their freedom. But we didn't know how to trigger the transformation again. They tried biting their hands, bathing in the pools, and even drinking it. But nothing worked. Then one day, someone betrayed us. A child, small with blonde hair and Grisha's face, his eyes horrified and sad. They took us here, the Marleyans, to turn us into Titans. But not before they were tortured. But when they tried. The Marleyan guards looked up in horror as the Eldians turned into monsters, things far worse than Titans. They swarmed their wall, killing them all and destroying their ship with a savage vengeance. But now we were stuck. On this island and in these forms. The small horde of monsters roamed Paradis for weeks and months. Me and the others, we had to eat the Titans just to keep sane. And some of Grisha's willingly given flesh. Eventually the owl found us again. Eren Kruger. He was one of the 9. The attack Titan. The man's muscular Titan wrestled with one of the more starving crawlers. He told us things. Things I'm not sure how he knew. The truth about the coward king and the vow. He stood before the beasts as a man, Grisha's 2 heads looming over him protectively. He also knew some things about what we turned into. How to hibernate, to speak, and more. He never told us how, and none of us were sane enough to ask that at the time. Not even Grisha. Especially Grisha. His wife Dina. She was turned into a Titan before we transformed. Why did that woman seem almost familiar? He couldn't kill her. So we left her to be at the time. But she still followed them. Slowly. The owl left after that. He was running out of time. He was dying, but from what? We stayed like that for a long time. Weeks? Months? I don't know. They were getting worse. My comrades, most of them died. They tried to stop them. They went mad from the hunger and just ate each other. It wasn't like the Titans. Titans weren't starving and in pain. The Titans weren't desperate. Me and the others learned how to stave it off with bouts of hibernation. Grisha woke us up. Until he didn't. Last time he woke only me up. He found how to turn into a human. He had a plan. To go inside the walls. I don't know what, if anything, went wrong. The next thing I know, I hear Jaegers roar and came to the walls. And here we are. Everyone stood in silence as they absorbed the sad, tragic tale of Grisha Jaeger. From the death of his sister to joining the restorationists. Not to mention all the strange things in the outside world that they had to just try to imagine. Large flying machines? Horseless carriages? Horseless steel caravans at that, traveling on paths made by lines of metal and wood. It hammered home to Hang that while the government had kept them stagnate, The outside world had pressed on in the past 100 years. But Erwin and Pixis glanced at one another subtly, both very sure that Grice was avoiding some key important details in the story. Parts that were irrelevant or too personal. Or perhaps something he wanted to tell Eren directly in his own time? Armin silently tried to take in these reveals, eyes wide as the implications overwhelmed him. But it was Mikasa who looked back out and saw that Eren was unnaturally silent and deep in thought. No growls, no glares, just empty expressions of contemplation. She wondered what must be going through his head hearing all of this. If only she knew. I hid in that plugged-up hole you have until the fighting started, Grice finished after a moment. So that's why we couldn't spot you. Your slithering ass was right under our noses, Levi remarked with a frown. In my defense, I had no idea what was going on anymore, Grice said. I thought Grisha might be in trouble. But that's about all of my story. Any questions? Only about a million. Hang answered with a wide grin before her face turned serious, looking at Frida with a mild glare. But I think we have one more story to hear. Frida hummed softly. Grice, did Grisha tell you what his plan was in coming here? If he did, I don't remember it, Grice answered gruffly. My memories get fuzzy when the hunger sets in. Frida paused, leaning heavily on her walking stick. The day Maria fell, he came to me. He wanted me to stop the Titans. But he knew I couldn't. We both transformed. The full power of the Founder might have stood a chance that day. But even without the vow, I was still inexperienced and new to the founding Titan. He defeated me and... Everyone stared at her intently, waiting for her to finish. He killed the whole bleeding family, Kenny finished bluntly. Kaven gave him a look but didn't say anything, even as several gasped or looked on in shock. The dad, the mom, and the entire litter of siblings Frida had. Eren jerked back in alarm, but none questioned it as he remained speechless. That's a lie, Mikasa exclaimed suddenly. Mr. Jaeger may have had a lot of secrets, but he was always a doctor. Grice's story confirms that much. He would have never done something like that. There was a brief silence before Erwin spoke up, looking up at the crawler. Would you agree, Grice? He asked evenly. The Grisha that lived in the walls might be very different from the one you knew. Would your Grisha have ever done such a thing? Grice stood on the roof, deep in thought. Before we came here, I would have said no. That doesn't sound like Grisha. But now... He looked to Eren. Did he love your mother? Eren's entire body coiled as he snapped out of his shock, his head staving off their individual reactions to the memory of his mother's death. Ainz's rage, Zvai's solemnness, and Dre's sorrow. Yes, he did. Grice nodded slowly. I know I'm stepping on a mile of nerves, but I have to ask. When the wall fell, was she alive? Eren froze immediately, slowly turning to him with wide eyes. As far as he knew. As she died that day. He didn't know. Grice turned back to the group as a whole. Family has always been important to Grisha. Losing his sister is what put him on this path. After we came here, losing his family nearly destroyed him. Even as we adapted at first, he was still in a hell of his own. So, if it was to save his second family? How would killing an entire family save anyone? Armin asked in morbid, unsettled curiosity. Frida sighed heavily. Because the vow, Karl's curse, only affects the royal family. He believed we'd try to take it back if he stole it. That's the only reason I can think of. There was just one issue with that line of reasoning they all knew. You survived. Krista swallowed deeply. You survived? Frida looked her half-sister in the eye before holding up her arm, pulling back the sleeve to reveal her scars with an ominous look on her face. Eren stared intently. He could taste it in his mouth. Her flesh, her blood, and a morsel of... a power? I managed to escape with my life. It left me scarred and my powers unable to heal me, Frida answered with a frown. Grisha retreated. I presumed he overused his own powers. After that, I was in a coma for years. When I awoke, the vow against war had been lifted, but my ability to use the Founder had been crippled. That's new, Ymir remarked with a frown. At least I think it is. I've never heard of a shifter's powers being crippled. And shifters can normally heal from anything that doesn't kill them. It's never happened before, no, Frida confirmed, glancing at Pixis and Erwin. I'm sure you great commanders have noticed that the tunes of the court have changed much in recent years? Many gave Erwin and Pixis curious looks. I have noticed a good number of nobles retiring or passing away over the years, and that their successors are much more pleasant and some might even be generous, Pixis mused to himself, feigning fondness. I was wondering just who was shuffling the courts around. The attitude to the scouts has improved somewhat, not to mention that Niles seemed to be very busy and short-staffed for a while, Erwin noted with narrowed eyes. I thought that some corrupt element of the military police had grown too bold and required some unseen purges. You're both right in a lot of ways, Frida admitted with a tired look. After Frida woke up, she was a changed woman, Kenny said with a chuckle. We've been busting heads and moving things along in the shadows. To what end though? Hang questioned with a raised eyebrow. Frida managed a small smile. Changing the status quo isn't easy to do, short of an open revolt. Queen of the Walls, Grice said with something that almost sounded pleased. Are you implying what I think you are? That I have no intention of Eldia fading away into memory, Frida answered solemnly. I thought it would be Grisha I'd have to convince that we were no longer enemies. But now I'm standing before his son. You would have worked with the man that killed your entire family? Krista asked in disbelief. Their family, no one said aloud, but it was heard all the same. She was acutely aware of Eren's head looming behind her, watching intently, and probably wondering the same thing. Frida gripped her walking stick harshly. I don't know. Ever since I awoke, I knew things had to change. But when I thought I'd stand before Grisha again, I just wanted to know one thing. An answer that I wanted him to tell me himself. She paused, eyes glancing past Krista and right into Eren's eyes. Why did my family have to die when I was spared? But it doesn't matter. There has been too much hefting the blame of the past onto the next generation, Frida said simply, looking up at the giants. I'm not asking you to pledge yourselves to me. I'm only asking if you can bring yourselves to trust me, to work with me to save our people and stand against the hateful world that awaits us. Eren's middle head growled something out. Grice translated before Krista could. And if we can't? Then kill me, Frida offered bluntly. Frida, the hell are you doing? Kenny asked warily, his face tinged with unease as he eyed everyone for any hint of taking that invitation. Making a point, Frida answered as the situation became tense, glancing around at everyone in the room. If you think I'm your enemy still, you should strike me down now. I won't blame you. It's why I haven't claimed the throne openly yet. I want what's best for Eldia. If that's my death, then so be it. Let's tone it back a moment with the martyrdom. I'm hardly in a position to know what is best for the people of this island, Grice said in surprise, glancing toward Erwin, Hang, and Pixis. As far as I can tell, you lot are some kind of authorities here, right? They're two of the highest authorities in the military, and Hang is a genius that studies titans. Grice nodded quietly to that as the commanders looked intently at Frida. Am I understanding it right that you are asking for our support? Pixis asked, getting a nod in response. Why? Erwin asked skeptically. You could have easily taken the throne, officially, without any of this. You didn't have to reveal anything. So why? Because revealing the truth to the people at large will spread doubt and suspicion throughout the walls. If we are to survive and have a future, we can't succumb to infighting. Eren is the hope people need to rally behind. I can steer the people of the wall on the path to surviving and defeating our enemies. And I don't want to do that from the shadows anymore, Frida answered simply. Yeah, but... Emer spoke up uneasily. Even if we don't trust you, won't killing you just make it so that the founder is given to a random newborn somewhere? Terrifying, Levi summarized, imagining what a clueless infant might accidentally do with all that power. Depends on how you kill me, Frida answered simply, looking up at Eren meaningfully. Can we trust her? I don't know, but she is a shifter. So is Emer. We barely trust her. But she might be a big help. If she can recover her powers, yes. Do we care who's on the throne? As long as they're doing their job right. And not getting in our way. Krista watched the exchange before nodding as Eren finished with a growl to her. Eren says he doesn't care. He'll trust the commanders on this one. For now. Erwin nodded. They didn't need Eren's approval, obviously, but having the giant titan killer distrust their monarch could cause problems in the long run. I'm not sure if we can truly trust you yet, Queen Frida, but we do appear to have a common goal. So long as you preserve and protect the people of the walls, I will not speak against you, Pixis granted with a warning edge to his grandfatherly voice before smiling. Besides, any woman that can enjoy a drink as you can is one I can respect. Frida tipped her head to them. Thank you. But if I so much as smell that vow of yours coming back, you will be the first human I eat, Grice warned dangerously. I'll hold you to that, Frida said with a voice that spoke more of relief than fear. The group fell into an uneasy silence. What now? Krista repeated the question but almost felt like everyone already guessed as much. It seems we have at least 2 very large allies, possibly more in the future, Erwin remarked. Neither of them can turn into a human form. One of which has a feeding problem, Levi reminded as he looked at Grice. I have it under control, Grice stated non-defensively. But I do see the point. Armin raised his hand, getting everyone to stop. Permission to speak? Granted, Armin, Erwin granted. Well, I know it wasn't exactly what we had planned and the civilians might not be happy, but perhaps we should turn Trost into an area for them to stay? Armin suggested. Living as a giant monster in an abandoned city is kind of what we've been doing outside the walls anyway, Grice said in agreement. It's a good idea, kid. But what about this fella? Kenny said, motioning to Eren. Getting out won't exactly be easy for him. About that, Armin spoke again. I don't know how easy it would be, exactly, but I think Eren is small enough to get out of the breach if he moved the boulder. So, we just need Grice to move it back and climb over the top. Me? Grice said, looking his head back in surprise, eyeing the boulder in the distance. Maybe? I don't know if I can do that on my own. Do you have any more comrades outside? Armin asked. I'm not sure if any of them are still sane, Grice answered with remorse. But even just one might be able to make it easy. Me and Jaeger will just have to be careful about it the first time. This could work best for us, Hang said with wide eyes. If we can still go through here, we won't need to have to make an entirely new route from one of the other gates and set up new supply points. What about when we retake Wall Maria? Everyone glanced to Eren's left head for an instant before Krista translated. We'll cross that road when we get there, Erwin answered in acknowledgement. Eren decided to leave it at that. Now, I think we have a prisoner that requires a visit, Frida said with a meaningful smile. Section Commander Captain, would you care to join me? Why? Levi asked warily. Because Four Eyes over there really wants to, Kenny said with a snort, seeing the disturbingly eager look in Hank's eye. And Frida knows you don't trust me. That was already obvious to everyone. Shut it, brat, Levi said, not even waiting for an interpretation. Heinz snorted, ever satisfied with Levi's displeasure. Fine, sure, let's go see what our traitor has to say, Levi said with a head shake. Armin shifted uneasily. He wanted a chance to speak with Bertholdt again, but knew now was not the time. With that, Frida left with Kenny and Caven, Hang and Levi following after. But not before Frida turned to Krista with another smile. I'm come by afterward, Historia. There was silence as the door closed. Mikasa raised a brow at the girl. Historia? It's my birth name, Krista answered with a sigh. I'll explain some other time, please. No one else dared to pry into the troubled girl's business. Erwin and Pixis frowned before looking to Eren, who nodded. None of them trusted Frida yet. They were all on the same page for now. So, what about me? Emer asked slowly, pointing to herself. Do I need to go back in a cell or what? No, I think we're well past that point, Pixis said with a laugh. Merely remain within Trost for now. Keeping me with the other monsters, gotcha, Emer said with a nod. She was suddenly aware of said monsters giving her dirty looks. Geez, you dicks, it was a joke, Emer said under their stares. Krista said nothing, glancing around with a troubled look on her face. Can we have a moment to talk, Historia? What? Krista asked in surprise. Eren wants to have a talk with the princess, Grice translated. What? Why? Mikasa asked with a frown. You were listening to the same story, right? Grice reminded pointedly. Come on, you three. I'd like to hear what Grisha was up to while I was asleep. And I'm sure his son would be biased. Probably not in the way you think, Armin murmured before turning to Mikasa. Come on, Mikasa, I think they need this. Mikasa relented in understanding. We'll be nearby when you're done, Eren. Yeah, I'm not going, Emer said firmly. Eren gave her a look. I'm not leaving Krista alone with you. You already tasted Krista before I did. Emer defended. He did what? Grice asked in alarm. Heinz's mouth opened in shock, Zwei froze while refusing to respond, and Dre looked away with wide eyes and a soft glow in his throat. So that's how he blushes, Armin murmured in surprise while Mikasa had a disturbingly blank look about her. Emer, Krista said in exasperation. I appreciate the sentiment, but, please? Emer looked alarmed before biting her tongue. If that's what you want, she said in disappointment. The trio of humans left while Grice climbed off the building, moving down the street, hopefully out of hearing range. Well? Krista asked with a sigh. What did you want to say, Eren? What am I supposed to say? I'm sorry? I wish he hadn't killed them? Krista took a breath. I didn't even know them. I doubt they even knew I existed. And now they never will. And that's why you're sad. But that's not all it is? No, of course it isn't. Krista screamed in frustration, running her hands through her hair in frustration. I thought I was just some noble's bastard. That's what Kenny told me. Now it turns out I'm part of the royal family, my half-sister is the secret queen, and everyone else is dead because your father killed them. Oh, and my family has the founding titan but couldn't use it because of a curse or vow or something. Then there are people outside the walls that want to kill us all. Emer is decades old, she's been working with my sister, Annie. Krista suddenly kicked a nearby chair, sending it crashing over, but probably hurting her own foot more than anything. She didn't care though, breathing heavily and ignoring the pain in her foot. I just feel like I don't know anything anymore. That everything in my life was a lie, that everyone was using me and I'm not even sure what for anymore. Eren let her rant off, taking it all in with thoughtful concern. What do you want? Krista opened her mouth before closing it with a bitter look. I don't even know. I've lived my whole life wanting to be seen as this selfless girl, who'd die and be remembered fondly. Because I thought that was the only meaning I could have in life anymore. Now? What about Emer? Krista brought a hand to her face, rubbing her eyes. I will always be Emer's ally, I promised her that much. But I don't know what to feel about her right now or anything else. You found out the most secrets even more than me. It makes sense you'd be the most overwhelmed. Krista sighed as she removed her hand. Eren was sure her eyes were filled with unshed tears. If you want to be alone, I'll leave. If you want to vent, I wouldn't share even if I could. Krista almost laughed at that. Thanks, I think I needed that, she said before a strange look came over her face. What about you, Eren? What do you think about all this? I don't think Frida is telling us everything. The blonde nodded in agreement, she expected as much to be honest. I don't know why my father killed her family. If you want nothing to do with any of this, you don't have to be here. Grice can translate if needed. Krista was silent before letting out a soft chuckle, tears leaking down her face. I'm sorry, it's just, I think this is the first time anyone ever asked me what I wanted. It sounds like this is the first time you tried to do what you wanted just for yourself. Krista shook her head. I'll stay. I want to help, I really do. But, Eren? She paused with an unsure look. Do you remember anything after your heads grew back? Before you snapped out of that trance? Krista stiffened minutely as if looking past Eren, at something that wasn't there. What did you hear? Not much, but there were 2 words that I could make out, barely, Krista said cautiously. She had Eren's full attention now. It was just a bit intimidating, all 6 eyes watching her. Maggots. Whelp. Bidibidibidi. End of chapter. So, yeah, that's the big difference point in the story so far. Grisha and his group found this lake of death that turned them into kaiju shifters. They had no idea how to trigger it, but it went off on its own when they were sent to Parody. Frida and Grisha fought, but she survived at the expense of being crippled. And she's been changing things behind the scenes for when she openly takes the throne and expose the truth to everyone. Oh yeah, and Krista/Historia. Yeah, at some point, I realized that she received more revelations than Eren did and decided this would be the perfect time for her to have an overwhelmed heart-to-heart with Eren. And as for that last line, if don't know what bidibidibidi means, that's how the onomatopoeia for Ghidorah's iconic roar. Yeah, just gonna leave that out there. Can I ask you kids a question? Grice asked after they walked a block or 2 from Jaeger. Well, he walked and they used their strange gas things to keep up with him. I'm sure? How can we help? Armin offered uncertainly. What was Grisha like in the walls? Grice questioned idly. Armin and Mikasa share surprised looks before mutually deciding to answer. He was kind, Mikasa answered softly. He took me in after my parents died. That mean Eren back there is your brother? He asked idly. Mikas blushed and looked away. No. He's like family to me, but no, we never had that kind of bond. Grice caught the meaningful glances Armin was giving him and understood. Eren was much more than a brother to this girl. Yeah, well, that sounds like Grisha. He was always happy to welcome new recruits. That's why we never let him do the actual recruiting. Man's heart was in the right place, but he sometimes forgot how many of our own would turn on us, Grice remembered fondly. Actually, it occurs to me I never got your names? Armin Arlert, Armin introduced. Mikasa Ackerman, Mikasa gave. Grice cocked his head. Ackerman? Ha, I suppose the Hiruzen blood is on your mother's side, he mused, getting a confused look from Mikasa. You have no idea what Hiruzu is, right? It's where your ancestors are from, where you got your looks from. At least, I think it's Hiruzu, but I can't imagine many other Orient nations having people here. A lot of what he was saying went over their heads, even if Armin filed most of it away for later, but they got the important part. So, there is a place where everyone looks more like Mikasa? Armin summarized. Yeah, but we're a bit off topic, Grice remarked. Grisha was kind. That all? No, he was also an amazing doctor, Armin answered with a smile. He helped cure a plague that was taking over our hometown. I think that was how he met Eren's mother. No, Mikasa said, pulling her scarf up some. But it was part of when she started to fall in love with him. Grisha's second wife, Grice mused, glancing back to make sure Eren was still preoccupied. May I ask, what was she like? Carla was kind but very stern. She was never afraid to speak her mind or call out others for being stupid. Eren got a lot of her temperament, Mikasa recalled fondly. Grisha was the passive one with her? Grice inquired in surprise. Went the other way with Dina. May we ask what she was like? Armin asked tentatively. Grice sighed heavily. Dina was a treasure. Never a bad word to say about anyone in the group. She always tried to be the reasonable one, to be the hopeful one. I think she was all that kept Grisha sane some days, living like we were. She was always ready to do anything if it just meant there was hope for our future freedom. Even when she was turned into a titan, she was smiling for Grisha. Why didn't she change as you did? Mikasa asked curiously. Grice sighed once more and shook his head. I suppose it doesn't matter now. Dina was of royal blood, descended from some relative of that Frida lady who didn't go here with the coward king. We hoped that with her blood we could take back the founder. Back before we knew about the curse. We didn't want to risk losing that, and neither did she. Mikasa and Armin went silent, having no idea what to say exactly. Is your name just Grice? Armin asked after a moment of silence. Grice didn't answer for an instant before shaking his head in bemusement. Everyone always just called me Grice like I just called Grisha, Jaeger. I think I almost forgot that was my family name, he mused to himself. My name is Gander Grice. But just call me Grice. Right? Armin accepted. You seem surprised that Grisha was more passive, as you said in the walls. Was he different out there? Mikasa questioned. Very. He was a doctor, true, but he always had a pit of rage and anger reserved for Marley and all they took from him from all of us, Grice answered fondly. Out of everyone, it felt like he was the most desperate to win sometimes. Mikasa frowned and thought. She always thought that Eren took more after his mother, but given everything she was learning, it didn't seem that simple anymore. Grisha had once been just like Eren was, railing against his situation in life. And both ended up with this strange power. Maybe that was why Grisha gave Eren this power, knowing he could handle it. But why not say anything? What happened to him? From Frida's tale, it didn't sound like he had been on the brink of death. And more importantly, how did he change back into human form? Not counting the first transformation Grice had mentioned many of the restorationists experiencing, Grisha had transformed back twice. Once to infiltrate the walls and once after killing the royal family. They were interrupted from their musing by the rumbling that came with Eren's feet. Where's Ymir? Waiting on that girl that can apparently understand monster, Grice answered casually. Eren nodded absently before turning to Mikasa and Armin. Anything interesting happen? Grice made to translate until Armin answered. No, not really. Just talking. Grice looked between them in bewilderment. Okay, can they understand you too? No, but we can guess what Eren means a lot of the time, Mikasa explained. That's impressive. And kind of endearing, I guess, Grice said. So, somewhat related to your father, have you always been able to shoot lightning from your mouth? No, that is new. It feels amazing though. Did Dad have that? Not before he went in the walls, no, Grice answered. Though. What is it? Mikasa spoke up with a head tilt. It might be my memories turning to shite after everything, but I swear there was a time when Grisha only had one tail, Grice remarked thoughtfully, looking up at Eren. And unless I'm wrong, you're a bit taller than he was. Why though? Can't be time. Dad was in this form for months. Maybe something to do with Frida? I'm lost now, what's he saying? Armin asked curiously. Trying to figure out why his form is changing more than it did for Grisha, Grice translated, thoughtful as well. Armin frowned. There was something I noticed during the battle, Armin remarked, getting their full attention. Right after your heads regrew when you were fighting Reiner? I know you don't remember much, but you had him pinned and biting him. But your necks were glowing, almost as if you were taking something from him. Grice gave strange clicking sounds of contemplation while Eren became incredibly quiet and thoughtful. They were talking about when Eren wasn't himself. When the voice in the storm had been in control. Just what had it been doing, Zwei wondered but didn't dare muse on it out loud. The storm wanted to kill the Titans the same as him. But it didn't care for humans, so it obviously wanted to end the Titans for a different reason. If Grice had any thoughts on Armin's observation, he didn't share them either. Meanwhile, Bertholdt was screwed. He knew that from the moment he woke up in a cell, laid against a wall with his arms chained above his head and his legs similarly bound to the floor. What happened he wasn't sure. He remembered the lighting from Eren's mouth, then falling, and everything after that might have been a nightmare. Surrounded by Eren, the Jaw Titan, and whoever or whatever the monster calling them Dogs of Marley was. Then a woman was behind him, touching his back, and nothing. Either that all happened or he had passed out when he hit the ground. It didn't matter either way, he was captured and definitely did not have the strength to transform. How did it turn out like this? He didn't enjoy being the colossal Titan, but he still felt like its power was almost invincible. How had he been defeated? What was this power that Eren had? And how many more were there like him? Why now, after 100 years since the fall of Eldia to Marley? Hello, Mr. Hoover. His thoughts were cut short by the disturbingly pleasant tone of a woman. He looked up and saw that there were 4 people just outside his cell, 2 men and 2 women. One he recognized as Captain Levi of the Scouts, eyeing him as if he were a wounded yet dangerous beast to be put down. One of the women he didn't recall the name of, just that she was someone else high in the Survey Corps. She was grinning at him, and he wasn't sure if that was scarier than Levi. The man with a hat was unknown to him, but despite looking amused and relaxed, Bertholdt could tell he was dangerous. And last but not least, Lady Frieda, sitting on a crate for a rest, smiling at him with feigned benevolence. I take it you know who I am? Frieda asked idly. Lady Frieda, a noble within the walls? He answered evenly, trying to keep himself collected and not freak out. Yes, that is what everyone was told, she agreed with a nod, resting her chin in her hand. But is that all you think I am? The memory of her touching his back flashed in his mind, with a strange numbing shock that he barely recalled now. No, I suppose I don't, Queen of the Walls. Frieda chuckled. Good, that saves us some explanations. What do you want? Why am I alive? Bertholdt asked with a frown. We can change that pretty quickly if you want, Levi warned coldly. Easy rut. Don't want to make him piss his pants, do ya? Kenny asked with a chuckle, getting a sideway glare from Levi. Boys, play nice, Frieda requested in jest before returning to Bertholdt. I just thought we should have a chat while you're still in one piece. Bertholdt stiffened at that. Oh, what do you mean, oh queenly one? Hang asked with excited interest. Shifters can survive and recover from almost anything if they have the will and know-how. But this is a double-edged sword. A shifter can't change form while doing significant healing, say regrowing a limb. But you have to be careful. If they're already healed before the limb is cut off, they can transform. The trick is that they have to be already healing to cancel out the transformation, Frieda explained helpfully. As the founding Titan, however, I was able to shut down his ability to shift at all for 24 hours. He can still heal though. Ah, I see, so we need to keep his powers occupied before that timer expires, Hang said with a devious gleam against her goggles. Bertholdt mentally cursed these horrible devils, knowing he was going to be in hell before long. What do you want? He demanded again. Frieda lost her smile, giving him a narrow look. Why are you here? Bertholdt couldn't look more confused if he tried. Sorry, I should be specific. I know you're here for the founder, Cammy, but I'm not sure why Marley is doing it now of all times. So enlighten me. What is the official reason for your mission here? She asked curiously. Bertholdt debated not answering. But the answer wouldn't help them against Marley. It was hardly a secret either, it was actually kind of obvious. To take the founder and finally end the threat you and this island pose to the rest of the world, he answered without much conviction. I'm sure there were other reasons for the higher-ups, but for us, we were just trying to save the world. Levi rose an eyebrow. You bastards use Titans and you're saying the world is that scared of us? He asked skeptically. As far as the world is concerned, we still can control Titans, Kenny reminded, shaking his head. Still, yeah, definitely just some noble shit dumped over their real reasons. Bertholdt didn't argue. Ulterior motive or not, it didn't change the fact that the whole world lived in fear of the idea of the rumbling. Taking the founder, ending that 100-year-long fear? There had to be something right in doing that if there was nothing else right in this cruel world. But even with that answer, Frida only looked curious. "That's all?" she asked in thought. When Berthold had no further answer, she hummed. "I suppose that's good." I was almost worried for a second. Now Berthold felt something crawling up his spine, a sense of suspicion and dread. "What are you talking about?" Frida hummed. "Things are going on beyond Marley's understanding. And as you have plainly seen, there are greater things in the world than titans." 3 sets of roars echoed in his ears. "You think Eren will be enough to take on the entire world?" "The entire world?" Frida repeated with a glare, standing abruptly. "Berthold Hoover, you have no idea what the world even is, let alone the whole of it." With that rather ominous statement, they left the shifter in a deep sense of dread and uncertainty. It wasn't until they were up the stairs that Hang commented. "So, what exactly were you planning to learn from that?" Hang asked curiously. Frida turned to her, her ire still present from Berthold's words for some reason. "Marley hasn't found the Lake of Death yet." That had their attention. "How do you figure?" Levi inquired. "Eren Yeager was about a decade old when Wall Maria fell," Kenny reminded, leaning against the wall. "Grisha didn't seduce a lass and put a bun in her right away. It's been a long while since Grice's people were put on this island. Between what that kid said and how much of a surprise old Golden Boy was for them." "I see," Hang said in understanding. "If they had found it, they probably would have found a way to force a transformation. And with the way everyone talks about Marley, they wouldn't hesitate to use that. Couldn't they have found it while the brats were here?" Levi suggested. "If they had something like Eren or Grice, I'm sure they would have sent them as backup, given how much they fear the founder," Frida remarked. "You say that like you're not the founder," Levi pointed out suspiciously. "I am, but I'm far from what I could do," Frida mused, touching her scarred arm. "I haven't been able to transform since that night I fought Grisha. But it's best if they don't know that. Otherwise, Marley might just try to attack us head-on and attempt to kill everyone on this island." "Everyone?" Levi repeated with a frown. "Would they go that far?" Frida nodded slowly. "My time before I was crippled was like a blur. But I could learn about the outside world through the Founder's connection to all subjects of Ymir. And what I saw was horrible." Levi kept his gaze on her until Kenny cleared his throat. "These Marley bastards, that turn people into titans to wander forever or just as cannon fodder. According to Frida, they're one of the nicer places." Levi's eyes widened minutely before his mouth set into a scowl. "So, us against the world?" "No," Frida said with a mysterious smile. "In that situation, it'd just be us fighting the rest of humankind. Just the rest of humanity." That felt ominous to Levi. Meanwhile, Annie lay motionless on top of Wall Maria. She ran so hard and for so long that her cheeks were gaunt and missing flesh still from where her titan had been connected to it. Strange, phantom agonies twitched in her arm every now and then, but she was too exhausted to even react to the pain. "Berthold isn't coming." Only her eyes moved as she glanced at Reiner's seated position next to her, glaring north toward Rose. Toward Trost. Toward Eren. "No shit," she said evenly. "They know who we are now," Reiner said with a frown. Annie didn't respond now. "Rescuing him is going to be hard," Reiner said under his breath. Annie snorted or tried to, only managing to give herself a cough. Please don't fucking kid yourself." Reiner gritted his teeth. "We can't just go back failures with the jaw and the colossal loss to the enemies." Annie frowned, giving him a pointed look. "How did Eren know?" Reiner paused. "Maybe they told him beforehand?" Annie looked entirely unimpressed with that answer. "Don't bullshit me. You were looking right at him. He was fine and then suddenly freaked out. He figured it out on his own." "How?" Reiner opened his mouth before looking reluctantly thoughtful. "It wasn't until Ymir showed up. Maybe he can see or smell our powers. Doesn't matter how he can, just that he can. Eren can tell if someone's a shifter. He might be able to sense us even if we tried to lay low and sneak back in," Annie pointed out. "So what? We just leave Berthold to die? Go home to be fed to our replacements?" Reiner asked, unwilling to accept that just yet. Annie hummed. "I don't think they will." "Probably." Reiner glanced at her, inquiring about her meaning. "If they believe what we say about these monsters they have, Eren and the other thing? They'll not want to risk passing the powers off to someone inexperienced with such dangers lurking about," Annie speculated. "Of course they might think we're full of shit and just throw us head first into some sap's titan mouth. They sat in silence for a long time. What the hell even was that? That thing Eren became? Reiner asked quietly. Hell if I know, Annie muttered, mumbling, lifting up her arm. It still hurts where he blew my Titan's arm off. Reiner nodded. I can feel his fangs in my back still. Titans don't feel pain, Annie commented. I remember that much. The researchers told us Titans don't have a nervous system like we do. Movement and touch, yeah, but pain and pleasure are things they can't feel. Even if they did. Reiner trailed off. Why is it still bothering us? We should have healed more by now. You know the only reason I'm talking about this is because I don't have the energy to kick your groin to shut you up, right? Annie retorted suddenly. Reiner shook his head. Fine, I'll change the subject. What do we do? That's a good question, warriors. Annie found the will and energy to sit up, looking at the voice in alarm and suspicion, Reiner looking over in disbelief. There was a man before them with glasses and shaggy blonde hair, smoking a cigarette. It's been a while, Reiner. Annie? Zeke? Is that you, War Chief? Reiner asked, wondering if he was dreaming. Zeke chuckled good-naturedly. I suppose I've changed a bit. You both look the same to me though, just bigger. How long have you been here? Annie asked with a frown. Right here? I've been walking from down the wall for some time now, he answered, frowning now. But I landed on the island a few weeks ago with Peak and some soldiers. Reiner gripped his head in frustration. You mean, you've been here this whole time? We could have, damn it. If we had known, we might have been able to save Bertholdt, maybe even win. I'm afraid I wouldn't have been of much help, Zeke said with a troubled look on his face. Annie furrowed her brow. Zeke, where are Peak and the others? Peak is with the survivors, Zeke said with a frown. We ran into some complications. Reiner and Annie shared a look before giving him uneasy glances. How many heads did it have? Zeke rose an eyebrow. They only had one head each, but there were a lot of them, Zeke said, taking a drag of his cigarette. Strange creatures with only 2 limbs and a tail. They're as big as Titans, but they definitely aren't. There are more of that bastard, Reiner growled. It seems we have a lot to share and catch up on. Should I assume Marcel and Bertholdt didn't make it? Reiner balled his fists and looked down. Bertholdt was captured just today. But Marcel? He died before we ever got to the wall, Annie answered flatly. A buried Titan surprised us. Zeke nodded slowly in understanding. Come on, we're not safe here. Why not? Annie asked in confusion. These crawlers? Zeke said slowly. They sometimes come up on the walls looking around for food. And I'm sorry to say, you both look like easy prey for them. That gave them both a renewed sense of dread, forcing them to gingerly get to their feet and ignore any protest their bodies made. Zeke nodded to them and the trio began to walk in silence. So, tell me, do you know anything about these things by chance? Zeke asked idly. No, Reiner answered. But there is something worse than them. Oh? Zeke asked, glancing back with a scowl. Warchief, Annie said with a pursed frown. Does the name Eren Yeager mean anything to you? Zeke suddenly stopped at the mention of his surname, turning to face them suspiciously. I don't recall a relative going by that. May I ask what that name means to you? Right now, Eren's name only meant one thing to Annie and Reiner. Bang. End of chapter. There we go. Grice has some interesting talks, free to get some information out of Bertholdt without him realizing it, and Zeke has shown up. But yeah, the rest of the crawlers have been terrorizing Zeke and the rest of the reinforcements. Honestly, most crawlers are easier to kill than Titans, but they very smart predators and humans in this world aren't used to fighting Intel Legend monsters, the 9 shifters aside. Again, yes, might be putting this FIC on hold in the next few months until the next Monsterverse movie. Can I ignore it? Well, certainly. But I like the option to incorporate it if I want to. Regardless, I hope you all enjoy this all the same. After that, everything took on a momentum of its own. Or that was how it looked to everyone outside the know. Frida took her leave and in less than a week, a great many things were announced. King Naiwit Fritz had officially stepped down as King of the Walls, the official report being that his old age had caught up with him and impeded his duties. This made way for Frida Fritz to openly take the throne. She had discarded the name of Reese, and everyone had easily accepted the story of the Reese family being another line of Fritz. Between her ascension and tales of monsters fighting titans, and humans that could become titans, scarcely anyone had noticed that several other nobles or important figures had been summarily replaced. And the few that did notice either didn't care enough to do anything or were pleased by the event. The government hadn't endeared many people to it, so the change was treated either apathetically or optimistically. which was how the current situation had developed. By order of Frida Fritz II, Queen of Eldia, the district of Trost is to be repurposed into a military area to house and coordinate with our giant allies, designated collectively as the Rudos, Riesen unbekannter terrestrische Organismus, giant unidentified terrestrial organisms. However, anyone wishing to enter the city to attempt to salvage from their homes will be allowed to do so within the hours between noon and 4, for 2 weeks' time. Armin watched from the side as Rico finished reading aloud the declaration to the gathered crowd before handing the large parchment to a soldier, who hammered it to a post. Naturally, he could see that many were nervous about going inside the city with the giant creatures still within. He couldn't blame them, but precautions had been taken. Grice was away for now, and Eren was staying near the boulder while people were in the city. So problems should be contained just to accidents by either damaged houses or human stupidity. Damn, this is all so weird, Jean said with a sigh as the gate to Trost was open, and a few brave souls ventured inside. I feel like we're part of a cover-up and only know half the story. More like undoing a cover-up, I think, Armin mused. Did you notice what she called Eren and Grice? Yeah. Rudos. Surprised they didn't just call them Titan Killers or something, Jean mused. Yes, but giving them a collective name when there are only 2 of them so far? Armin said with a frown. I think they're expecting more to show up, possibly stay here as well. I don't know how many can fit in a district without getting cramped, Jean remarked with an uneasy look. But you really think so? Grice said his comrades are still out there. And it's possible there are more besides them, Armin answered. Of course. Of course what? Jean asked with a raised eyebrow. Nothing, never mind, Armin waved off sheepishly. Jean looked unconvinced but didn't press on it. Armin looked ahead with a look of deep thought. Frida knew more about this than she told, he was sure. Just what could she be hiding? Riesenwalk Artlert. Rico called out. Here, ma'am. Armin answered as he headed over to her. This is the group for back Eren Street, Rico answered, motioning to several civilians. You know the drill. Escort them to their homes, assure them they won't be harmed, don't let them run off to get a look at Jaeger or Grice, and use a flare if there's an emergency situation. Armin nodded, looking at the group. If you'll all follow me, please. Also, Artlert, where is Ackerman? Rico questioned, barely hiding her exasperation. Well, if she's not here, I would assume either keeping an eye on Sasha or keeping Eren company, Armin answered with a shrug. If you see her, send her this way, we could use more escorts, Rico instructed simply, getting a nod of understanding before the blonde headed off. Okay, next group. Meanwhile, Riesenwalk. Giant Guard or Giant Watch. Mikasa wasn't sure which was more fitting. It was a new, special designation given to those who were assigned to the Rudo district. A formal title for what she and her fellow graduates had been doing for a while now, keeping watch over Eren and acting as a buffer between him and people who might not be able to accept a creature like him as an ally. The only difference was that now extended to Grice as well. A familiar, soft growl invaded her ears and elicited a smile from her face. She was sitting upon the boulder, and Eren had been laying around it for a nap. Sleep well, Eren? He rolled his eyes at her, and she caught his meaning without the need for translation. You slept too much. There wasn't much he could do with people coming into Trost to collect what they managed to salvage from their homes. If he went anywhere or did much, he'd probably just scare the civilians half to death. Don't worry, it's only another hour, Mikasa reminded, which did nothing to elevate Eren's mood. Oh, you shouldn't ruin your beautiful visage with such a nasty look, Eren. All 3 of Eren's heads almost looked relieved by the arrival of the ever-eccentric Hang, landing on the ground nearby. Section Commander, Mikasa greeted politely, less enthusiastic about her arrival. You know, you would be calling me Riesen Captain or Riesen Commander, but someone vetoed that, Hang said, giving Eren an accusing look. Eren gave her a pointed look and snapped one of his tails against the ground. Oh, will you stop? I don't have many plans to be poking near your anal cavity, Hang defended with a huff. Implying that you do have some plans, Mikasa pointed out, Eren looking entirely validated in his action. Unrelated, would you mind standing up for a moment, Eren? Hang requested with a curious look. The 3 heads looked at each other. Ainz was skeptical and annoyed, Zwei's skepticism was bordering on disbelief, and Dre was eyeing Hang for any hidden equipment. Despite that, he ultimately did as she requested, rising to his feet and standing near his full height. It seems like you finally stopped getting bigger, Hang observed, cupping her chin. You were about 20 meters just after the scouts returned. Now you're nearly 30 meters tall. Everything else grew too. 4 more meters to the necks, 5 to the tails. Your foot looks like it's big enough to step on a 5-meter titan completely. Best not to tell Ymir that, Mikasa commented as she came down to join the scientist. But do you think he'll keep getting bigger? Probably. But it doesn't seem to be growth based on time alone. Perhaps fighting causes it? Or killing titans? Hang proposed. Stronger with every titan he killed? Eren liked the thought of that. It showed, given Mikasa even looked at him. If so, there is hardly anyone better for this power, Mikasa said with a frown. But if he gets too big? Yeah, that'll be a problem, Hang agreed, glancing at the boulder that blocked the breach. It'd be a tight fit for Eren, but he should manage. But if his growth continued, well, it'd be another story. Heretics. The trio turned to see a man across the bridge leading to the boulder. Beneath his disheveled cloak, it was easy to see the medallion of the Church of the Wall. Blasphemous demons. Look at how you have desecrated the walls, he accused angrily, motioning to not only the boulder but the many cracks and marks in the wall. Some were from where the colossal titan fell, but most were from where Grice had been climbing up and down the walls. You will all burn before the wrath of the goddesses for defiling their sacred gift. Ha, one of them slipped in, Hang mused as the man continued to ramble. Eren's middle head yawned, utterly uninterested in the drivel they were hearing. I'll take care of him, Mikasa offered as she walked forward. What's all the yelling about? The wallist gave a start at the loud voice, causing him to back away from the deep trench. Out from the gap crawled a very sleepy Grice, cracking several of his joints as he rose up, the zealot falling back in fear. Morning, Eren. Mikasa. Giant fetishist, Grice greeted. Ah, thank you. And it's past noon, by the way, Hang informed with a smile, Eren crooning his agreement. Really? Damn, I slept good down here, he said, shaking the cobwebs out of his head, turning to face the source of the yelling, now whimpering and sputtering. Who the hell is this? Just one of the wallists, Mikasa answered idly. Wallists? Grice questioned. Oh, just some crazy folks that worship the walls, Hang explained with a chuckle. Grice stared for a moment. You're joking, right? He asked, turning to face the terrified man. She's joking, right? The demon speaks. You won't trick me, foul beast. My faith is strong. The power of the goddesses Maria, Rose, and Sina will protect me, he cried out, sounding like he was trying to convince himself. What? Goddesses? You. Grice shook his head in disbelief. You don't even know what those names mean, do you? Silence your lies. They are the names of the goddesses who made the sacred walls, the believer declared, trying to rise to his feet and stand tall by his belief. Daughters of a goddess, if that, Grice retorted with a headshake. Such a weird thing to keep those three names. This part of Eldia's past and culture? Mikasa asked, Eren's heads leaning forth with mild interest as well. I'll explain right after we escort this dumbass out. Would one of you ladies mind accompanying me? Grice requested. Accompany? Grice, people are still going around looking for their possessions, Mikasa pointed out. You'll terrify them. Yeah, well, might as well as give people a live show of us big bad monsters being decent people. And I think I have a better shot right now being able to talk, Grice reasoned. From what I've heard, being able to talk might not have helped Eren here, Hang said with a chuckle. Eren speaks his mind a lot, Mikasa summarized vaguely. Grice looked to Eren and seemed to understand. I see. Mikasa blinked as Eren's leftmost head nudged her forward. You want me to go with them? She asked curiously, causing him to nod toward the interior meaningfully. Oh, you want me to see how Armin and the others are doing and if they need my help? Eren nodded firmly. In resignation, Mikasa went to follow after Grice, grabbing the wallist roughly as she forcefully led him away under protest. My, it's adorable how you two seem to keep trading being the responsible one, Hang said teasingly. Eren snorted but didn't deign to try and convey more of a retort. Oh, don't be like that. You love having me around? Hang said with certainty. Ainz looked away in refusal to acknowledge her claim, Zwei couldn't give a negative yet would not confirm it, and Dre had a sheepish look about him. So Eren, Hang said, her tone losing its humor and drawing his attention in full. Has everything been all right since you fought Reiner and the others? Physically he was fine and they both knew it. Mentally he was okay enough. Or as okay as he could be with 3 hets. But emotionally? Some of your friends were in shock, even denial for days afterward, Hang said in sympathy. I understand you were close to them all in some way. Eren nodded solemnly, wrathfully, bitterly. Reiner, who was like a brother to everyone. Annie, who helped teach him how to fight. Bertholdt, the gentle giant one couldn't help but befriend. At that moment he realized that their auras were the same as Ymir, and what that meant. Dre wanted to deny it, defy his very sight and mind. He didn't want it to be true. Zwei had tried hard, so hard to think of another answer, any explanation for what he had seen. But Eins? That head didn't really remember thinking at all. Just rage and wrath and fury. But the moment he looked at Reiner and saw the look settle in his eyes, Eren knew it was truth. And in that instant, there was a strange, hateful clarity that consumed him for the rest of the battle. That was gone now. All he was left with was rage he couldn't express, the sadness he refused to dwell on, and the implications their betrayal with what he understood after learning the truth of the outside world. Have you talked with anyone? Mikasa? Armin? Just Krista or even Grice? Hang asked in concern. He answered, but Hang couldn't understand him. Eren was too distracted to try and convey the answer more clearly, and Hang felt it best not to push it more. I won't pretend I know what you're going through exactly, Hang said with a soft smile. But I get what it's like to be stabbed in the back. We've had a few people turn craven or sell us out in the past. That didn't surprise Eren at all. Humans could be terrible creatures, especially in hard times. Just. Hang took a breath. Remember, you got people you can trust, okay? Your friends, obviously. I don't know if I'm on that list, but dash. Eren nodded without thought or hesitation. I am? Hang said, suddenly grinning. Aw, aren't you sweet, you beautiful bastard? Dre smiled weakly. Zwei almost did as well. Well, he wasn't frowning or anything. Hang carefully glanced around before turning serious for a moment. Eren, do you trust Krista? He cocked a head at her, nodding very cautiously. There was a suspicious look in his eyes, as if he knew what she might ask. Hang's expression became resolved. Then please, can you tell me what I saw? Hang asked firmly. Eren stared, but there was no confusion in his eyes. When you were headless and I touched you, I saw things, Hang said, scowling in frustration as she rubbed her head. It keeps popping back in every now and then. Like my mind is still processing it, piecing it together. But never enough for me to really understand. Eren felt it at the back of his mind. Hang had the storm's attention. Why, he didn't know and wasn't sure he wanted to find out. Eren snorted, blowing air in Hang's face. She was startled but refocused her attention on the here and now. Right, sorry, just, should I get Krista or not? Hang asked awkwardly. Eren shook his head slowly, deliberately. Oh, I'm alright, Hang said, feeling like the situation became more ominous than it needed to be. Another time? Eren nodded and watched her leave, knowing she was on edge. His baleful eyes looked downward at his shadow. In his eyes it looked bigger than it should. He could feel the almost mocking look of the storm, despite its silence. While not tired in the slightest, Eren laid himself down for another nap. Not that he expected it to be a peaceful one. His eyes snapped open and he found himself somewhere else. He was standing atop a hill. Or a mountain. A pile of dirt and stone either way. It was warm and he could feel it rumbling beneath his feet. Below was a field filled with small shrubs. Now wait, those were trees. How big was he in this dream? Not a dream. He shook his head, reminding himself that this wasn't just something he was imagining. Clouds rolled overhead and lightning thundered in his ears. Eren still had no idea precisely what this entity in his mind was, or what it wanted. But he had learned several things about it since his battle against the shifters. It could communicate with him but didn't care to. Eren mostly sensed the storm's reaction to things. Usually snarling, growling. Sometimes cocking a head in confusion or chortles of mockery. Mostly he could just tell when it was present and paying active attention to something. It hated titans like him, but only referred to them as maggots. It didn't care for humans unlike him. Lightning crackled in the sky and the battle against the traitors rang in his head. Unlike him for the most part. It was also very much aware of everything Eren did and probably more. Eren could sense annoyance and sadistic amusement from the storm at random times, for no apparent reason. And lastly, Eren could see its memories. At first, Eren thought this was a connection to the Titan shifters. After all, Ymir and Frieda had informed them about shifters inheriting their predecessors' memories to some extent. But after a while, Eren realized that he wasn't just seeing his father's memories, but ones from long, long before his father was born. A world without titans. But a world with other giant monsters. Eren wasn't even sure humanity existed in those memories. Ahead? Eren started, following the directions of the voice of the storm. On the horizon came a massive figure. It walked on 4 legs, clawed in the front and hooved in the back. It was gray save on its green back. It took Eren a moment to realize the backside of this creature was actually covered in trees, enough for a small forest. The large skull was reptilian but flatter than Eren's. Its ancient eyes were white and pupilless, its teeth sharp and long horns curled down and inward on both sides of the skull. Just by how it walked, Eren knew this beast was already ancient. It looked up at Eren, at the storm, but paid them little mind as it found a spot to its liking. Once it did, it began to lay down and burrow itself into the ground before settling into a deep sleep. What is that? Who cares? Why are we watching this? Eren looked up at the clouds, despising the voice of the storm and its vague silence. What do you want with Hang? The clouds and wind spun in front of him, taking on the likeness of Hang, her voice echoing on the gales. I saw things. Eren stared for a moment before it clicked. You want to know what she saw? Which means, you don't know. And that pisses you off. Thunder rumbled overhead as an answer. What could she have seen? There was silence. No wind, no thunder, not even the beating of his own massive heart. Then he heard it. Something pulsing, something rhythmic. And the tingle up his spine, and next that something dangerous was approaching. Eren turned to the other side of the mountain. He could see the ocean and the sandy shores. Something he longed to see, dreamed to see. But he noticed none of that. All he could focus on was the glowing, pulsating light of blue that was swimming across the sea, like a blade striking through the waves. A blade that could strike the heavens themselves. Dre opened his eye, and was staring right at Connie. As in, Connie's face was less than a foot from his eyeball. All three heads jerked up in surprise, Connie falling on his ass in surprise. Hee, you had something stuck on your eyelid. I was trying to get it off. I swear. Connie explained quickly. Eren wasn't sure if that was a dumb lie or just something Connie had been dumb enough to do. Eren, you're finally awake. Sasha greeted, hanging upside down on the wall by her ODM gear. Don't worry, we definitely didn't have our lunch on your heads. Connie seemed to forget that Eren had 3 heads, and was perfectly capable to give Sasha a deadpan look while seeing him giving a neck-cutting gesture to stop talking. These two were good soldiers. It was easy to see how they survived against the Titans. How they survived in daily life he wasn't so sure about. I told you idiots not to eat on him. Eren cocked his head up to see Jean leaning on the boulder with an exasperated look. You slept through the excitement for once, Jean muttered. Excitement? What did we miss? Who's the idiot this time? Jean didn't even bother trying to figure out what Eren was saying, just assuming he wanted more information. Grice freaked everyone out by going to the gate. Rico looked ready to have an aneurysm until, well, you should have seen it, Eren, Sasha said with a chuckle. Some little girl went up and hugged his leg. It was cute. Eren quirked his heads. Well, Grice probably handled that better than he would have. He handled it better than you would have, Jean said, annoying Eren with the unintentional agreement. Managed to softly shoo her back to her mother without making it look scary. Well, scarier. People were warming up to them. That was interesting. And almost too good to be true. Someone else tried to cause trouble though, Connie commented. And suddenly the world felt right again to Einstein's Vi while Dre was a bit disappointed. But why was Connie still smiling? Oh, he means the idiot that tried to throw rocks at Grice, Sasha said with a laugh. Even Jean looked like he might laugh. Which was rare, his horse face was not prone to laughter. You've seen his skull, right? Harder than this boulder, I'm sure, Jean remarked, rapping his knuckles on the stone. Everything bounced off him and Grice just pretended to barely notice. Everyone else started laughing until they gave up. Eren chuckled all 3 heads. He wondered what was weirder for these 3. The strange sound that passed for his laughter now, or that it came in 3 as one. But either way they didn't seem to mind. For right now this was good enough for him. Meanwhile, having headed out for a snack, Grice lurked about a forest as he traveled outside Wall Rose. Against pure titans he didn't really need to be sneaky. But pure titans weren't what concerned him. A smell entered his nose and he could taste it on his tongue. Blood, and it wasn't human. He moved as quietly and quickly as he could until he reached the edge of the forest. He stopped, scanning the area for any obvious enemies. Slowly he moved out, watching for any hints of a trap. He had doubts there was one, but he didn't survive everything just to get cocky. He came to a stop as he looked down sorrowfully at what he found. It was another crawler, another member of the restoration movement. Who, he couldn't tell, but they were one of his precious comrades all the same. They were covered in bullet wounds, but those had only been an annoyance by the looks of things. One arm was torn off. Not bitten or gnawed off, he knew that well enough. They had crawled here too. He looked up and saw the blood trail, soaking the groan and leading far away toward Wall Maria. The dogs are on the hunt. End of chapter. So, yeah, Ghidorah is getting more active in Eren's head, and there is now a fourth small military group for keeping watch over the giants. Also, instead of Mudos, giant monsters are called Rudos. Yeah, Mudo isn't supposed to be a species name, it's supposed to be a short name for massive unidentified terrestrial organism. Besides all that, yeah, this FIC will be put on hold for a bit in the near future. You can expect it to return after the new movie comes out in March. Sorry if that disappoints anyone, but it is a temporary thing. You truly don't remember me at all? Frida asked, disappointed and sad. I'm sorry, but no? Krista? Or rather, Historia answered honestly if not fairly confused. Well, that's annoying, Kenny said with a grumble. I'm sorry, but when exactly did we meet? I don't remember an older sister or anyone else on the farm. Historia asked, bewildered but wanting to have some answers. Frida's face twisted at that. I erased your memories with the founder? Historia stared, unblinking. You what? Yeah, one of the weirder things it could do back in the day, Kenny said idly. Anyone that can get turned into a titan the founder can control. Even make them forget things or remembers things that didn't happen. Just like how the first king of the walls erased our memories of the outside world, Historia recalled in a mumble. It was one thing to hear about such a power, it was another to know it was used on herself. But why though? Did you tell me something important? No. I just didn't want to put you in danger, but I was selfish and wanted to see you too. I hated leaving you with that woman, but with the vow and everything else. My mind was a mess at the best of times, Frida explained with a sigh. I'm not trying to excuse it. I had a good intention behind a very jumbled reasoning. And Kenny sending me off to the military? Historia asked dubiously. What was the point of that? Frida was in a coma by then, Kenny interjected. I just did damage control in the meantime. Historia frowned, unsure if they were telling the truth but no way to be sure what, if anything, was a lie. I know it's asking a lot, but may I try to? Frida requested, taking a hobbled step towards her half-sister. While reluctant in the extreme to allow someone to literally mess with her mind, Historia still did have the strangest gut feeling she could trust this woman. Not to mention she wanted to know as well. She nodded stiffly while allowing her to approach. Frida placed her good hand on Historia's head, gentle and soft. A maggot queen? And redrew her hand, clutching at her scarred arm with a look of pain on her face, her eyes glowing softly for a brief second. Frida? Kenny called in concern as he took a step closer. What's wrong? What happened? Historia asked, feeling an electric chill down her spine. Frida grunted, closing her eyes in agony before taking a deep breath as the sensation subsided. I just thought it was the royal blood, I thought that was why you could hear him, Frida whispered, more to herself than to Historia. Eren. Did he try to eat you? Historia blinked at that. No, but he did catch me in his mouth. Kenny raised an eyebrow at that. Well, I suppose without any arms. I don't understand. What does that have to do with anything? Historia asked curiously. Frida grunted, leaning on her cane. I'm guessing that the same power that tried to take the founder from me is also affecting you, shall we say. What do you mean? Historia asked with a furrowed brow. Frida had a strange look in her eye as if she was looking past Historia, not seeing her at all before her eyes refocused. I mean that, in effect, you're cut off from the founder. What that entails, I don't know entirely beyond the fact that I can't give you back your memories. Historia could only stare awkwardly before she found her resolve. You're not telling everything you know about this, are you? Kenny had a neutral poker face while Frida smiled. You're very perspective, Historia. Or perhaps Eren was the one who noticed. Does it really matter? Historia asked with annoyance. I think everyone is assuming you're holding something back. Something important. Something that I can't reveal yet. Because there are already enough revelations and problems to deal with, Frida admitted and explained in the same breath. You are right though. There are matters at hand that predate Eldia and Ymir's titans. And the people of the walls don't even know what Eldia was, let alone imagine something before it, Historia said in bitter understanding. There is something I feel the need to tell you about. After a talk with Hang, I realized that Ymir didn't reveal an important part about the Nine, Frida said with a solemn, apologetic look. Why would she still be keeping secrets? Historia asked, confused and almost angry now. I imagine she is trying to figure out how to tell you. Don't be too upset with her, it is rather hard to accept for herself, I imagine, Frida cautioned sympathetically. Historia suddenly felt a pit in her stomach, as if she knew this would not be a pleasant secret to know. There is a curse on all Titan shifters. And flashback. Despite everything, Eren did not have many bitter feelings towards Ymir. That said, he wasn't exactly her friend. Besides a few barbs and greetings, they had rarely ever spoken much at all during their years of training. But it was still a little hard to ignore her sitting on the side of a roof as he walked past. That is not sitting, that is moping. That's depression. Yes, she is sad, obviously. Ymir glanced up with a frown, watching the three heads argue with one another. How the hell can you squabble with yourself that much? What, not have enough brain cells to share between each head? Bitch. She's lashing out to feel better? Rather poorly at that. Still a bitch. Seeing Eren's unimpressed stare, Ymir grunted. Guess I might as well tell you. I'm sure Care Historia will if I don't, she muttered bitterly, perhaps even enviously. Eren stepped closer to the shifter, leaning down his heads to her level on the roof. He found that made it less awkward sometimes if someone didn't become terrified of his maws. Ymir ran a head through her hair, looking slightly unkempt with ends sticking out. I'm going to die. All three heads jerked slightly, sharing a glance before looking at her with interest, alarm, and concern. It's something I left out about shifters. I didn't want her to know yet. I didn't want to have to drop that on her in the middle of everything else. Ymir rambled in regret. All of us, the 9? Being a shifter comes with a cost. The curse of Ymir, ironically. Once you obtain the power, it will kill you in 13 years. Eren stood silently, taking in that information. She became a shifter when the wall was breached. She only has 8 years left. Reiner and the others must have even less. Ymir snorted. I'm just going to assume you did the math and figured out how long I got left. After the hell of being a pure Titan, I didn't mind having an expiration date. Just as long as I could spend it how I want. That this life would be mine. And I would be free. Eren's 6 eyes glimmered with understanding and sympathy for her. They were similar, the both of them, with the desire to live as they pleased. Suddenly, Ymir and her actions made more sense to Eren. I'm not asking for a pity party, Ymir said firmly, holding her forehead. I just need to get that off my chest. Historia is pissed since, let's be honest, this isn't the biggest secret, but it is probably the most important one from me to her. And I kept it from her. I want to make things right with her. I can't bear the idea of dying and leaving her wearing such a bitter face because I fucked things up again. On some level, Eren didn't like how much he could relate to that sentiment. The idea of leaving Mikasa, tears staining her face and scarf, still, he nodded and gave a chortle of encouragement to her. Thanks, Ymir said idly. If there's one thing I like about this shitshow is that I know she's safe after I bite the dust. Being able to translate for you and being the Queen's sister makes her too valuable to risk stupidly. Not to mention, well, you're you. Ainz eyed her pointedly, very sure that she was referring to his personality and not his form. So, I can't believe I'm asking this, but... Ymir paused with a smirk. Did she taste good? Eren refused to react to that question at all, merely staring at her while trying not to think about it. Asking him implies you don't know yourself. Both glanced up, seeing Levi standing on a chimney of the house. Eavesdropping like a creep, shrimp? Ymir asked with a small smirk. You know, since you can regenerate, I'm more inclined to dismember you, Levi commented idly. Come on, we have a situation. Head to the east side, you'll find Erwin and the others there. With that he took off, leaving a confused and grim pair. Mind if I hitch a ride? Ymir requested. I promise not to bite this time. Ainz growled, Zwei glared, and Dre rolled his eyes, jerking his head for her to get on. You really are the softy of the three, Ymir teased as she jumped on Dre's head, holding onto the horns for safety. It was a short walk for Eren, following the streets nearest the walls. Eventually they came to a large group of soldiers, mainly scouts, forming a semicircle perimeter next to the wall. Eren, Ymir, it's good you both arrived, Erwin called out from the rooftop nearby, Historia standing near him with Hang. Ymir jumped off to join them, the air awkward between her and the blonde girl. Historia. Later, something big is going on, Historia said firmly. Right? Ymir accepted resignedly. Ignoring the drama before him, Erwin addressed the shifter and the dragon. Grice reported that he's found many of his comrades dead and dying. He's brought back a corpse to the wall and is dragging it up from the other side. That's morbid as fuck, Ymir mused, glancing at Hang. I'm guessing this is so she can study them, but if it's a corpse dash? We're all here in case it happens to be alive, or can regenerate like Eren did, Erwin explained. As much as it would be beneficial to have another Rudo among us, Grice was not optimistic about them retaining their minds. Eren nodded. Basically, he was here to put down a potential threat if it arose. It made a painful amount of sense, not expecting or relying on Grice to be able to do the deed if needed. There was a hissing roar from high up, drawing everyone's attention to the sight of Grice on top of the wall with the ragged body of another creature that looked just like himself. Grice seemed to hesitate for a moment, placing the body on the wall rather than dropping it. What's he doing? Historia wondered aloud, squinting up at the sight. Checking to make sure he's really dead, Levi answered idly, a knowing look on his face. With a frustrated screech of anger and sorrow, Grice pushed the body over the side, letting it fall. The soldiers all moved and scattered to make sure they weren't close to the impact site, the corpse's tail partially crushing a house while the main part of the body fell into the street. Everyone watched for a tense moment as the body remained unmoving, not so much as a twitch. The silence was broken in by the sound of claws against stone as Grice slid down walls, more harshly than normal. Here, Four Eyes. I'm sure you're dying to get your hands on this, Grice snapped towards Hang as he stalked angrily about. I prefer my specimens alive, Grice, Hang said in sympathy as the crawler moved towards them. Grice grunted, taking a loud and raspy breath to calm his nerves. It looks like my old comrades still hate Marley as much as they ever did. They're attacking the shifters? Erwin specified. And whoever else they brought with them, Grice said, nodding to the body. I've been finding a few bodies like this. They were definitely shot at by guns among other things. Eren frowned as his head studied the corpse. It was like Grice, but with many tiny marks where the bullets had embedded into the skin. Most didn't draw much blood, but the chest was caved in as if crushed. Zwei narrowed his gaze, seeing some stones embedded in the wound. Have you found any alive? Ymir asked with a frown. Grice tensed and growled. Just one. She tried to eat me before I had to put her down. Everyone wisely didn't touch that topic again. Shouldn't we consider heading out there if they're attacking Reiner, Annie, and their allies? Everyone waited as Krista relayed the message. Brat, I know you were fresh out of training, but you know getting everything ready for an expedition isn't easy, Levi pointed out dryly. Erwin said nothing and that was telling. Eren has a damn good point though, Grice said with a hissing growl. If the dogs and their handlers survive my comrades, they'll be able to hunker down and plan for when we come. You say that as if you know where they are, Hang remarked with a raised eyebrow. Shingen Shina. No one missed the rumbling in Eren's three throats as Erwin said the name of his hometown. If there are humans and supplies with them, the only way to get them safely inside the walls would be through the breach, Erwin deduced. Annie and Reiner also know it's where our goal ultimately lies. If they set a trap, it will be there. Eren turned to Grice with a thoughtful look. Could they do it on their own? Grice didn't have the same endurance as him, but he could still take on the shifters easily. According to everything they knew, Marley had 7 of the 9. They had captured Bertholdt and Ymir was on their side, but Reiner and Annie would definitely be there. The Warhammer probably wouldn't leave Marley with how secretive it was. That left the beast in the cart. And whatever other reinforcements they had. Eren knew he was powerful, but Bertholdt proved he wasn't invincible. He'd gladly kill every enemy before him, but Zwei was smart enough to keep the 3 heads from collectively running into such an unknown situation. Not to mention the basement. No one took much notice of this grunt, for not all of Eren's noises were words. Grice pretended he heard nothing while Krista quietly related to Erwin. The blonde commander cupped his chin. Yes, that was another thing Erwin had to consider. Grisha had left. Something in his basement, something for Eren to find. What it was, not even Eren could guess anymore. But if it related to this power and form Grisha had passed on to Eren, it wasn't an appealing idea to let Marley potentially stumble across it. Commander Erwin, Grice spoke up, looking up at the sky with a thoughtful look. I do know where some of my more sane comrades are. Is there a reason you haven't contacted them already? Erwin asked skeptically. Because of the less sane comrades, Grice answered with a hissing sigh. I didn't want to lead the ones mad with hunger to them. But with this all going on, you want to gather them for an attack on our enemies, Erwin deduced, or to at least bring them here. Some of them were hibernating like I was and would be sitting ducks for the dogs, Grice explained. It's a good idea. The more on our side, the better. And we'll get to take the fight to Marley. All 3 heads turned to Erwin with a final question. Historia looked over her shoulder at Erwin as she summarized. He wants to know what the plan is, Commander? You're both getting ahead of yourselves, Levi said, raising an eyebrow at Erwin. Aren't they, Commander? Grice, how is the Titan situation outside the breach? Erwin asked stoically. Between me and my comrades eating them, and the Marleyans drawing some towards them? It's very light, Grice explained, liking where this was going. Then perhaps an expedition is in order, Erwin reasoned, glancing back to Levi. We have a chance to either rout our enemies from the wall or get information on their numbers and assets. We need one of these outcomes. But Levi is right. We don't have the resources to issue an expedition or the time to gather the supplies. What about just sending us? Emer suggested with her arms crossed. Eren and Grice, yes. But you will be staying here, Emer? Erwin explained. What? Okay, why me? 'Cause I think we're past the potential spy shit, Emer questioned curiously. Because if the enemy captures you, they can retake your power by feeding you to another Titan, Hang reminded with a frown. With that, Erwin addressed both of the giants. I need you to listen carefully. This is not a battle or an ambush mission. Your goals are simple. Rally any of Grice's other comrades you can. Survey the situation at Shiganshina. Do not attempt to engage them. We need to take risks, however. You are both our only true advantage against Marley. If something happened to both of them, the people of the walls would be at the mercy of Marley's titans and technology. It went without saying. Well, time to practice moving that boulder, Grice remarked, pausing to take one last look at the body of his fallen comrade. What was their name? Historia asked softly. I don't know, Grice answered honestly. I know their voices by heart and I could smell the difference, I guess, when they were alive. But crawlers all look mostly the same. With that solemn statement, Grice trotted off to the wall, Eren heading after him. Eren. He paused, looking back at Hang, who looked concerned. Don't do anything stupid out there, okay? She asked with a small smile. Eren snorted 3 times over before stalking off. No promises, Historia translated softly. Well, at least the brat is honest and self-aware, Levi said with a head shake. Erwin, are you sure about this? I'm sure we need to know what is going on beyond Wall Rose, Erwin answered evenly. Our actions beyond that are uncertain. And as much as I'd prefer sending some backup. Levi quirked an eyebrow at the pause. We don't know how to fight something like Grice or his mindless comrades, Erwin reminded, nodding to the corpse. If Eren and Grice come in conflict with them, our soldiers would just be liabilities. Levi hummed but didn't argue that point. Eren's friends won't be happy about this. Especially Ackerman. Speaking of which, where are they? Hang asked idly, not seeing them around. The shift for keeping an eye on Eren was supposed to be Emer and I, Historia answered with a frown. And due to recent events, they decided to give you both space, Erwin said without pause. Emer glanced away. Well, that and they had some meeting with that Rico woman. Something about formalizing schedules or something. With the creation of the Reason Walk, it was moving from being an informal group to a recognized subdivision of the military. And while Eren's friends had taken the role fairly seriously before, this now entailed more formality and regulations. Rico Brzezinska had been appointed as a temporary leader of the group. Not officially part of it so much as aiding in organizing it, which was needed since most of the Reason Walk were still fresh cadets. Perhaps we shouldn't mention it until after our giants leave, Levi suggested. Last thing we need is Ackerman trying to tag along with them without permission. Erwin deeply considered that. In the meantime, Levi, head to the breach. Send up a black flare if Titans get inside again. Right. Meanwhile, Eren and Grice approached the boulder, eyeing it with some uncertainty. Both for separate reasons. Are you positive there aren't any Titans just outside? None I can see. Or smell, Grice answered, looking the large stone up and down. Look, I know you're crazy strong, but I'm not sure I can push this into the right spot again. Never know until we try. With that, Eren began to push the boulder, pressing his heads against the side, trying to dislodge it from the gap. You got it in there real good, eh? Grice observed with a cocked head. Shut the fuck up or help, damn it. Just as Ainz snapped, the boulder began to nudge and wiggle out of place, chunks of stone falling off the broken hole in the wall. While it took a great deal of strain to move, Eren found it much easier than when he plugged the breach. Once it was dislodged, he carefully rolled it to the side. Well, it looks like you should fit, Grice noted as he looked through the opening. Now let's see if I can move this thing. Eren watched as the crawler moved next to the stone and began to push and groan with all his might. Try pushing with your tail? Muttering something dark to himself, Grice nonetheless followed the advice, pushing against the floor with his other appendage. While it wasn't as easy as it was for Eren, he did manage to get it moving. Eren wisely chose to go through the opening, lest they have to do this a second time. It was just barely big enough for him to fit through. If he got much bigger, this could become a problem. But as he left the walls of Trost, he paused as he took in the landscape. The lands they had abandoned years ago when Maria fell, the rotting ghost town just beyond Trost. Yes, it was tiny compared to the rest of the world, and yes, he had seen it from atop the walls already, but still. It was the first time he had set foot outside Wall Rose since they lost Maria. There was something strangely satisfying about it. Eren was pulled out of his musing as the boulder fell back into place, blocking the way back into Trost. He wasn't too worried about that, he could push it open anytime he wanted. Within a few minutes, Grice came climbing over the top. Okay, Grice grunted as he landed next to Eren. One of the places we need to visit is on the way to this town of yours. It's one of those giant forests this island has. Eren cocked his head at that. Those rare outside the walls? Grice cocked his head. I don't know of any that aren't on this island. But that's not important. Once we get there, we should have some backup. Then we head close to the walls and figure out what is going on. Eren nodded in agreement. It wasn't much of a plan, but it would work. After all, they were just scouting right now. But if a clear chance to finish off some of their enemies arose, well, the commander did say they needed to take risks sometimes. Meanwhile, Reiner groaned as he kneeled in Titan form, the tongue of a crawler still on his fist from when he had ripped it out. The armor Titan was cracked and crippled. They just don't stop, Reiner panted in exhaustion. How many even are there? He had fought off 3 of them protecting a hideout for the Marleyan soldiers. The other 2 ran away after he killed this one. They were smarter than the Titans. They rarely tried the same thing twice, they moved alone and in groups, and they mimicked voices. The warriors could fend the monsters off, but each time they lost a bit more to them. Supplies, men, hideouts. Sometimes just sleepless nights. And worst of all, KSI. Reiner froze at the haunting, hissing chuckle filled the air. He looked over and saw it. A crawler staring directly at him, head poking out from beside a street. In its mouth was the leg of a soldier. It stood there, slowly and deliberately savoring its meal as Reiner numbly watched. It wanted him to watch. Worst of all was how cruel these things could be. It wanted him to know he had failed. KSI. With a final, sadistic chuckle, the crawler ran off, slipping away. Reiner felt his body moving in its own accord as he rose in his Titan form, limping forth to look down the street the crawler had come from. There was a hole in a wall of a building. It was large, where the snout had basically stabbed into it. Blood splatter was all over the place. If they hadn't been eaten, they had been crushed by the claws. They had probably called out for him, someone to defend them, but with the 3 others to battle, he couldn't have heard them. Reiner wanted to scream, but all he could was numbly stare. Damn it all. End of chapters. More and more things are buzzing along. Grice is going to be gathering his saner friends, Eren is ready to fight something, and Ghidorah himself is a constant shadow over everything. And yes, skull crawlers can be really sadistic creatures when they have to be clever about hunting. And yes, some part of the humans is still in there, directly that cruel cunning towards the warriors and Marleyans. Anyway, as a reminder, I'm going to be switching to Eren the Usurper, until the next Monsterverse movie New Empire comes out. Got one more chapter to this though before that. What? Hang flinched back as Mikasa slammed her hands on the table. You sent Eren and Grice outside the walls, alone? Mikasa asked darkly. Yes, but not for an attack or anything. Hang promised quickly before turning calm and serious. There's been a development. Grice says his comrades, the ones mad from starvation? They're attacking the shifters and their allies. Jean furrowed his brow skeptically. You sent Eren Yeager out on a scouting mission. You do realize that Blockhead is just as likely to just try and take the fight to them. Hang sighed. We're aware of Eren's temperament, but we didn't have any options. It was either send them or do nothing. Why not just send Grice? Armin asked curiously. Isn't that what he has been doing for us anyway? That is true, Hang admitted, fully aware that Mikasa's gaze was still displeased if not outright pissed. But several of the crawlers have died. Eren, however, is much harder to kill. In the absolute worst-case scenario, we know he is almost guaranteed to make it back to Trost with the information. Wait, so, Eren is Grice's backup, basically? Connie summarized. That's one way of putting it, Hang mused. Trust me, this isn't how we wanted to do things. Commander Erwin's plans were to set out with Grice and Eren on the next expedition. But this isn't something we can afford to ignore. She's right, Armin agreed, putting a hand on Mikasa's shoulder. If they have a chance to bunker down, they'll be more likely to have a trap waiting for us. Mikasa said nothing, taking a breath before turning to leave the room. Armin watched her leave in concern. Was there anything else, Section Commander? Marco asked politely. No. You obviously don't have any giants to watch, so take this time to relax and recuperate, maybe help get your schedules in order. I heard you were still dealing with that, Hang offered. That'll be all, we'll alert you when they've returned. Ma'am, Armin said with a nod as Hang left. I don't like this, Jean muttered with a frown. What, you worried about Eren too? Connie asked in surprise. Not about that idiot, Jean grunted, rubbing his head. Before it was bad enough against just titans, but we might have to fight things like Eren and Grice, not to mention whatever weapons the people from outside the walls have. And we only know how to fight against titans. Armin looked down, knowing Jean was right. Humanity within the walls was largely relying on Eren and Grice now. Against the shifters they could adapt and fight, and other humans were simpler to fight against. At least practically, emotionally was another matter. But the Rudos were another matter altogether, unknown and unstudied. Armin's only sense of relief on that front was that Eren's golden reptile form was unique among what the Eldian restorationists had turned into. Grice was nothing to ignore, but Eren was definitely the more dangerous of the two. Maybe they're still figuring it out? Sasha suggested. That's kind of obvious, Connie said with a snort. No, you baldy. I mean, maybe they're still figuring out how to use all the information and other stuff the new queen gave away, Sasha pointed out, glaring childishly at Connie. That was a good point, Armin concluded. Frida had officially retracted many laws, secret and known, after taking the throne. Technology was no longer being stifled, and everyone in the military had heard rumors about the higher-ups making plans for how to use that for the struggle against the enemies of the walls, human and monster alike. Not to mention whatever information that Frida was sharing with the brass that could aid them in taking on these new threats. Still, Armin wasn't all that surprised that Eren had gone off ahead. That was normally like him. Meanwhile, for all Grice's envy, Eren had to admit that crawlers were certainly faster at running than he was with his body. He was heavier and with shorter legs, whereas Grice had proportionately longer limbs on a lighter form. That said, Jerry, a titan grunted out, dying as Grice tore out the nape. The restorationist rapidly tore off and ate the flesh before it could dissolve, more swallowing than chewing. How does that even work? Doesn't it just vanish in your stomach? No idea. Grice answered, chugging down some arm muscles. Maybe I digest it before it can? Maybe eating it stops it from disappearing? I don't really know or care. It keeps me sane, that's the important part. Eren couldn't help but feel sorry for Grice, constantly feeling like he was starving, only able to fend it off by eating enough to keep his hunger at bay. Eren, we should talk for a bit now that we're alone, Grice said after scarfing down the last decent-sized bit, turning to face the three heads. Now, shouldn't we get going? Time is of the essence. I know, but we don't get to be away from prying ears too often, Grice said seriously. There was something I didn't tell you about these powers. Partially to keep it from everyone hearing, but also, I'm pretty sure you know about it on some level. Eren stared, giving away nothing. He wasn't the only one staring now. Grice hissed in his throat. I can smell that, hear that, feel that. He's watching from just behind your mind, isn't he? Eren started at that, but the voice of the storm remained silent. He scowled, giving Grice his full attention. What do you know? Grice shook his head before looking up at Eren, his body tensing until, eat, hungry, ate, nothing, hiatus, beauty, food. Eren leaned away as the voice was emitted from Grice, for lack of a better word. It wasn't actually coming from the crawler but in his direction. Grice shuddered, his entire body curling tightly before he relaxed, stretching his jaw open as if yawning. That was mine, Grice answered simply. All he wants is food and not to get killed. As long as I'm doing that, the real crawler doesn't mind me being in control. Real crawler? What do you mean real? Is that all it thinks about? The poor bastard and the rest of his kind are born starving, so? Yeah, pretty much, Grice answered, sounding almost sympathetic to the creature in his mind as he began to slowly pace a bit. While I was sleeping for so long, I began to see things, dream things. But they weren't dreams. It took me a long while to understand that. They were memories. Memories of not someone else but something else, Grice started off ominously. Eventually, I had a realization. When I'm starving, I'm not losing control of myself. Something else is taking control. Something? Eren's gazes trailed meaningfully over Grice's body. Yes, Eren. The real crawler. These forms we have, they have minds of their own. Consciousnesses. They were once alive a long time ago. But then they died, somehow. Just like how they're somehow back, Grice continued uncertainly. MMM? Eren's eyes widened, feeling that noise more than he heard it. Was the voice of the storm, pleased for some reason? What do you remember? Grice shook his head. The memories are vague and hard to put together still. I remember being like this. I remember my siblings trying to eat me. I remember eating some of them and a lot of other things. I remember other creatures, things far greater and terrible than what I am. Things that could crush the walls just by walking through them. Eren remained silent as he felt a strange tingling down the spines of his necks. I just wanted to make sure you know that there is something else in there with you, something that originally had that body. And if you give it a reason, it'll try to take it back, Grice warned. That one Eren knew too well, all three sets of eyes glaring out of the corners, aimed at something that wasn't really there. And something he couldn't truly see met his stare all the same. The whelp? The two traveled in heavy silence after that. There was nothing else to talk about and Eren's mind was still too busy with what Grice had told him. On some level, yes, he had known everything Grice had told him. But to know someone else was going through it and he wasn't just insane was a relief in its own way. Despite taking a detour, Eren still had a good view of the area between Trost and Shiganshina, and his new senses told him plainly that there weren't many Titans in the area. The scouts will have a much easier time on their next expedition. Oh. Grice glanced back as they neared their destination. I've heard of that. The soldiers under Erwin are tasked with adventuring out into Titan country. Is it as grim as it sounds? Only half of the new recruits survived their first mission. Grice did something between a grunt and a growl of displeasure. When we first planned on coming here ourselves, we thought the Titans were completely under the control of the walls. We had no idea about any of this. Because we wouldn't be a good scapegoat if everyone knew we were trapped like cattle. Cattle? Grice muttered. That's not too dissimilar for us in Marley. I'm pretty sure they only let us live and breed just to have more Titans and warriors they can unleash. The subject was rapidly eating at their patience. I always thought the world was this big empty place, someplace waiting to be explored. It is. If you're not an Eldian, Grice remarked darkly. I thought the Titans were the only things between us and freedom. Grice hummed in sympathy, knowing that feeling all too well. How disappointing. Grice glanced back to Eren. The usual rage was not in his eyes, not even the angry one on the side. Disappointed was the only word to describe that look on his three visages, depressingly so. He reminded himself that Eren was still young, not even 16 yet. And everything he thought he knew and dreamed of had been shattered. You said we just had to keep moving forward until our enemies are all gone, right? Grice reminded carefully. So, let's take it just one enemy at a time. Thank you, Grice. Grice nodded over his shoulder before they came to a stop. The pair was now at the edge of a giant forest, trees towering over even their massive forms. I imagine you'd make good use of these trees. You're not wrong, Grice answered as he took a step forward. He inhaled deeply, letting out a massive, screeching roar. The sound echoed long and deep into the forest, an eerie silence coming after that. Get ready. We might have to fight some of the feral ones first, Grice warned as he tensed into a fighting stand. Eren nodded, eyes scanning for any movement, any sign of life. Eventually he spotted something. There? Grice glanced at Eren and followed the middle head's gaze, spotting a large shadow slinking through the massive trees. Eren's eyes went wide as he realized something very, very important. That's no crawler. It was too long to be a crawler in the wrong shape. Grix? A voice hissed out from the treetops. Is that you? And is that Grisha? Boris? Grice called up, relieved to hear a familiar voice. It's me, yeah. Come on down, we need to talk. The figure didn't move for a moment. Have you eaten Grix? Grice sighed. Yes, I have, Boris. Instantly, Boris shot out of the trees, diving toward Grice. A long, slender body wrapped around the crawler to Eren's alarm. He was about to try and help until... Grix? Oh, I am so happy to see you. Boris cried out, holding his comrade in what was now obviously a hug. Boris, come on. It's good to see you too, but pull yourself together. Grice called out, sounding less displeased than his words let out. Fuck you. Let me enjoy this. The last three of our comrades I've seen have tried to eat me. Boris yelled as he pulled back. Eren could only stare at the display, taking in Boris's appearance. He was much like a giant snake. The length between the tail and snout was about the same as the length between Eren's own. But he was not limbless. Rather than arms or legs, he had a set of large, leathery wings that formed like a crown or mane. But they appeared very strong, having helped Boris in hugging Grice. I'm guessing he doesn't have the starving problem? Zvai's voice interrupted the reunion, Boris's head snapping to Eren. Grisha? What happened to you? Didn't you only have 2 heads before? It's a long story, Boris, Grice said with a sigh. This is Eren Yeager, Grisha's son. Grisha remarried? How long were we asleep? Boris exclaimed in alarm. It's been close to 2 decades since we got to this island, Boris, Grice informed apologetically, climbing out of his coils. We don't have a lot of time, so I'll give you the short version. Several minutes later, Boris was less confused, but only somewhat. I see. I think. So I didn't dream up that part about the owl telling us everyone inside the walls was brainwashed to forget about the outside world. Boris mused absently to himself. But Marley sent the warrior unit? Why? Hard to guess. The dog we captured either isn't talking or the higher-ups aren't sharing with us since, it's hard to secretly tell us anything. Especially me since everyone can understand me, Grice explained. I barely notice anymore that we're speaking in different ways. Or, to be blunt, that I'm growling and roaring while you're talking normal, Boris remarked with a head shake. So, you want help to survey the situation? Yes. Unless I saw wrong, you can fly. What the hell even are you? Boris looked between the 3 heads, a bit bewildered. Grice shook his head. You'll get used to it. A bit. And we don't really have a name for what he is. We just call Grice's type crawlers because, well, you've seen how he can run and climb all over the place, right? Boris pointed out. Fair enough. Right, so where are we going? Boris questioned. Shiganshina, where the breach in the wall is. Grice says they should be there. The rest of the crawlers are giving them hell. Boris grimaced. We might have to clear them out if they beat the Marleyans and the warriors. But if they don't win, they'll likely all be dead. Grice groaned in sympathy. Boris, what about the ones you were keeping watch over? Are they still here? 3 of them, yeah. The other 2? Boris trailed off, glancing away. They're probably the ones attacking at this Shiganshina place. Eren looked at the 2 with a frown, wondering about a particularly sensitive topic. I'm sorry to ask, but do they ever recover after losing themselves to the hunger? Grice sighed heavily. Besides some dying moments of clarity? We've never seen it. Once they fully gave into the crawler, I wouldn't be surprised if they were mentally consumed somehow. Eren nodded in understanding. Should we wake up the others then? Grice shook his head. We'll get them on the way back. It'll be hard enough for us to be stealthy at all with the 3 of us. A thoughtful rumble was in Eren's throat, but he decided to keep it to himself for now. They wasted enough time as it was. Meanwhile, anyone outside of Parody would take one look at Mikasa and have the impression of a woman on a widow's watch, staring out to sea while vainly watching for her husband's unlikely return. Only she wasn't watching out over a sea, but the wide open landscape just outside Wall Rose. She stood on the walls of Trost, staring at the horizon while fiddling with her scarf, sometimes bringing it up over the bottom of her face. It was an old comfort of hers, a way to drown out her worries and anxious thoughts. It was funny in a strange way. She had always been faster and stronger than Eren, but he had always been the one running ahead without her or Armin. But now he was stronger than she could imagine. He wasn't physically human anymore. One day he could be. Grice had reignited that hope. But right now Eren was mightier than any titan. But knowing he was powerful didn't ease her worries, didn't make her feel any less unsettled about being apart from him for so long, with no idea what was happening. She didn't want much in life, a peaceful life, a life in the scouts, a life on the streets. She didn't care what kind of life it was mostly. Just being by Eren's side, going where he went, that was enough. But Eren's eyes had always been looking somewhere far away. She had heard it all before, obsessive, clingy and unhealthy. She didn't care. Because she didn't have much left in the world, and whatever she did have left was because of Eren. People who lost nearly everything clung to what they had left, who they had left. That was more natural than anyone could understand unless they'd experienced it. Mikasa Ackerman. She turned to the authoritative voice, the leader of the scouts. Commander Erwin, sir, she greeted while saluting. At ease, cadet, he said with a nod. I assume you're watching for Eren and Grice. The way he said "and Grice" as if it was an afterthought, was far from unintentional. Still, Mikasa didn't answer him verbally, keeping her face impassive. You don't approve of me sending them ahead, Erwin stated knowingly. Again, Mikasa said nothing as Erwin turned to look out on the vista before them. I've read on your file. I understand why you are so protective of him to an extent, Erwin stated calmly. Hang was worried you might try to go after them. If Mikasa could see them at all still, she might have considered it. She didn't say it, but she acknowledged the point. That was why I sent them ahead without telling the rest of the reason why, he acknowledged. I wonder if Eren would have stayed put if I hadn't sent him out with Grice? Mikasa looked a bit surprised by that comment. Eren, despite everything, has been a good soldier. I would have preferred he not attack the shifters when he did, but he had no way of knowing we were planning on uncovering and capturing them. Given his situation, his reaction was the correct one, Erwin mused. But even the best soldiers will have moments when they will act as they feel they need to, even if it goes against the chain of command. To make a decision that, due to the circumstances, they can never truly know the best choice until after the fact. Mikasa frowned and thought. Would Eren have gone off even without permission? Despite how impulsive he could be, Eren normally followed military orders well. But this was a rare situation. Their enemies were fighting another force, the mindless crawlers that had been Grice's fellow restorationists. Could Eren let that moment go? It was the right decision, Erwin stated. Sending them out to investigate. And without any supplies or support, you would only become a liability when your gas and blades ran out. Mikasa sighed heavily. Did you come here to ask me something, Commander? Hang could use some help. She's testing how durable a crawler is, Erwin explained as he glanced at her. Perhaps it will occupy your mind better than watching the landscape. And perhaps, it will aid us in not all falling behind Eren and Grice, should they need assistance one day. Mikasa stared for a moment. Very well, Commander. With that, she turned and left, leaping off the wall without hesitation. Erwin watched her leave with some amusement. She reminds me of Levi. Meanwhile, Boris soared high overhead, the dusk of day fading away, and the darkness obscuring his form against the sky. Finding Shiganshina wasn't too hard. He just had to find the wall, and then follow it until he found the outskirt the walls formed around the settlement. It helped that blood was in the air, the blood of humans, yes, but also the blood of crawlers, mingling with the stench of titans. He could see the crawlers, four of them at least, lurking just outside the walls. Crawlers, true crawlers, were not mindless. They were cunning. They were no doubt looking for a new place to attack. A red flare was shot down from the walls. The crawlers looked up at the sound and sight, one of them leaping up the wall to eat the flare. Gunfire ran from some sort of machine gun, the crawler screaming in rage and pain as it tried to get away, but the humans kept their target in sight. Crawlers were very tough in the skulls and their hides were thick, but a concentrated fire of this gun did break through the skin and savage the internal organs. However, the other three were already racing up the walls to feast on the small prey. Boris felt the air grow heavy and thick, just before a lightning bolt rang down from the sky, hitting the wall. There near the gunners stood a titan, a very female-looking titan. The flying giant snarled to himself as he watched the female titan fighting the crawlers off. As long as she was careful, she could kick or throw them off before they got a hold of her. The fall wouldn't kill them, but it might dissuade them from trying again. He was almost tempted to help his old comrades, maybe knock her off the top of the wall. But he held back as a strange whistling sound grew in the air. His eyes wide, Boris barely dived out of the way as large rocks ripped through the sky. They must have seen me fly in when she transformed, he realized in displeasure, looking back towards the town and trying to see who or what had been trying to attack him. There was another titan. It was hard to make out from this far up. It was strangely shaped, with arms too long, and, was that fur on its body? He dodged again as another round of rocks came his way, one or two nipping his wings. He winced and hissed but was glad to see he wasn't crashing. Still, he made to fly higher and return to Eren and Grice. End of chapter. If you don't know what Boris is, he's a warbat from Godzilla vs. Kong. And yeah, all kaiju shifters have the minds of the actual kaiju in there. So when the crawlers go insane from hunger, it's really just the real crawler taking back over. Beyond that, everyone musing on the current and changing situation. Hope you all enjoyed this. I'm sorry if the wait disappoints you all. Trust me, I wrestled back and forth quite a bit before deciding to give this FIC a break and wait to see the new movie. Until then. Mikasa wrinkled her nose as she sliced into the carcass of the dead crawler that Grice had managed to drag back for them. Huh. Mikasa raised an eyebrow at Hang, who stroked her chin while holding a torch. What is it, Section Commander? Your blades cut through it rather easily, Hang noted in surprise. But I had already tested guns on the skin earlier. It didn't even penetrate the skin. Mikasa paused before looking up to where several bullet wounds had definitely injured the creature, but many more where the shots had left marks but didn't breach the surface. So, the skin is resistant to bullets but not to blades? So it would see. Marley either has strong guns or ones that can just shoot quicker. Or both, Hang theorized. Still, this is good. We can definitely fight against crawlers if we need to. Mikasa nodded before walking to the elbow where the skin was obviously tougher. She made an attack against it and proved her suspicion correct. The head and joints are protected. The only reachable vital spots would be the neck. The more things change, the more they stay the same, Hang murmured with a headshake. Section Commander? May I ask you a question? Mikasa asked idly. You can just call me Hang for now, Hang waved off casually. Hang? Mikasa repeated. Do you have any theory as to why all of this is happening? Hang looked at Mikasa curiously. I understand vaguely why the traitors did this, that Marley wanted something from us, Mikasa said with a scowl. But why is all of this with these creatures happening too? They do seem to be two different events, I admit, Hang admitted. But I doubt they are. The giant creatures, what Eren and the others have turned into. They are clearly connected to the Titans somehow. But you ruled out Eren being a Titan? Mikasa recalled with a frown. I did, but him not being one doesn't mean there is no connection. For now, I have only theories, Hang said, glancing to the side with a troubled look. There is something else, isn't it? Mikasa deduced, making Hang wince. Ever since the battle, you've sometimes had this strange look on your face. I make strange faces a lot, Hang deflected with a smile. After all, I'm learning so many secrets and making so many discoveries every day now. Mikasa looked less than convinced but didn't pry further for now. She didn't distrust Hang. Well, as long as Eren's decency wasn't involved. She didn't trust the Four Eyes woman anywhere near Eren's groin, and neither did Eren most days. She wasn't sure if context made that thought better or worse. Meanwhile, while obviously the strongest of their group, Eren knew there was one huge drawback of his form. Stealth really wasn't an option. It had nothing to do with his size or weight, though those didn't help. No, the real issue was that his body was covered in golden scales. He stood out in any amount of light. Grice and Boris could at least possibly blend in with a certain amount of darkness, but unless it was completely night and the moon was either dim or empty, there was no way he could go unnoticed by anyone keeping any kind of watch. Luckily, their enemies were already under attack. Remember, we're not here to win, just do what we can, Grice reminded grimly as they heard the gunfire, explosions, and monstrous screams coming from the wall. The group of giant creatures were all gathered in a forest within viewing distance of their objective, the darkness of night still thick enough to hide them for the moment at this range. We take one of the dogs if we can, but above all else don't die. That's mainly for you, Boris. Why me? Boris asked in confusion. You haven't been in a fight in a long time, right? You might have a point, Boris said with a hissing sigh. But we all know the plan already. Let's see what we can do. Just watch out for the furry titan. Yeah, that was a concerning topic for them. Grice was fairly certain that was just the beast titan, but the alternative meant Marley found the Lake of Death, and that didn't bode well if they had their own monsters under their control. Still, the trio nodded and separated. Boris flew high into the air, Grice ran to sneak towards the wall with the intent to scale it, and Eren did the only thing he could do. He headed towards the breach in Wall Maria. As he ran, Eren could feel his blood boiling, his hate rising as memories came back to him so vividly. The helplessness, the rage that turned to despair, and so much more. This was where it all went to hell for them. And now, they had chosen to use this place, his home, as a base to further whatever terrible plans they had for the people of the walls? Ainz was the angry one, but pure hatred flooded Dre and even Zwei. We will kill them all? Meanwhile, the situation as it stood was not terrible in Zeke's opinion. True, they were dealing with unknown creatures similar to the Titans, but they were far from invincible. They could heal far more than a normal creature ever could, but they lacked the outright regeneration of Titans and they died of blood loss and organ damage just like a human was. They were very tough though. Sustained gunfire and concentrated explosives were the only ways to truly injure them without the use of a Titan. It took some adapting, but they were holding them off. However, these beasts were in fact thinking beings. Not human in intelligence, they were still extremely cunning and learned from the mistakes of themselves and their comrades. Their numbers couldn't be infinite though. Are you sure about this, Eldian? One of the Marleyan soldiers asked as they stood in a fortified building in the city, almost like a castle. You're thinking I'm going to let you all die, Zeke said grimly as he took a few last drags of his cigarette. I have no intentions of that. I hope I've earned that enough. But I understand your concerns. I am using you as bait after all. But given our situation, I cannot devise a better recourse. The officer grunted, glaring at the ground but offering no alternative. You can't control these monsters, I believe that much. Zeke made a point not to wince. He had come very close to almost getting killed the first time he fought these creatures. He didn't know a beast like that could move so much like a snake. He remembered looking up from within his titan and seeing fangs poking through the beast titan's neck, very close to him. If all goes according to plan, we'll thin out their numbers greatly. Those on land, but what about the flying ones? The officer countered. They are much rarer, thankfully, Zeke mused. I should be able to deal with any if we're careful. If we're careful, tell that to Braun, the officer sneered before stalking off. Zeke hummed. Reiner had been greatly troubled since he and Annie had returned. The loss of Bertholdt was great, and worrying to know the people of Paradis might possess it. But more than that was the other news. This golden beast and that name. Eren Yeager. It should be impossible, but it seemed his father had survived to make it to the wall somehow. Had another son, another pawn to play in the schemes to restore the Eldian Empire. Zeke's first instinct was to help his half-sibling if he had the chance. But this new power? Just where had it come from? It had to be connected to these creatures. Could the power of the Titans have mutated, evolved somehow? So why now though? If not, then what could it be? Too many questions. Zeke. Everyone in the building jolted at the voice and the loud thud as he rushed over to the nearest window, looking out to see Peek and her Titan. Are they coming? Not who we were waiting for, Peek informed grimly. Something large and golden is about to enter the city. Zeke stiffened. What wonderfully horrible timing. We need to change plans, he said grimly. There was a loud crash as an echoing screech rolled over them. That wasn't one of them, the officer yelled. Zeke, what the hell is going on? It's the creature Reiner warned us of. Their golden dragon, Zeke answered. The thing that defeated the colossal titan? The officer asked grimly. What chance do we have against that? Zeke scowled as he felt the ground rumbling. We're about to find out. Meanwhile, Bertholdt stared with dull eyes. He stopped crying and begging a while ago. They decided to leave him his hands, if only so he could feed himself. But every few hours or so they would come in and do it again. Cut off his legs. It was horrible, unending pain. Eventually he would become too exhausted, and he'd pass out while his regeneration slowed. And then he'd be awakened by another amputation session. Why didn't they just kill him? Devour him, take his power, and end it? He didn't want to die to be eaten. It terrified him, even if the image of those who died because of him haunted his mind. But this was just pure torture. Have you ever heard the story of the Hydra? Bertholdt looked up warily. There was the face of Hang Zoe. A face and name he had come to fear, loathe, dread, and have nightmares of. It was said to be this terrible monster. Actually, it sounded like Eren in a lot of ways, Hang mused conversationally, light glaring off her goggles. Like a giant snake or lizard. But if you cut off its head, it would grow two more. And two more and two more, until you were facing dozens of heads. Why was she telling him this? What did she want? A hero came along and killed it, of course, but that's part of a larger story, Hang mused. He killed it with fire. After cutting off the head, he cauterized the wounds so nothing could grow back. Bertholdt's eyes dilated with fear. Obviously that didn't work with Eren. Your transformation basically burned his heads away, but they still grew back, Hang mused absently. But I wonder if might slow down a shifter's ability to heal? What do you want? Bertholdt asked shakily. I'm a scientist. Why do you think that isn't all I want? To answer that question, to test that theory? Hang asked curiously. Bertholdt trembled. I can make the pain stop, you know? You went still. Honestly, as terrible as it is what you did, there is no point in keeping you in this kind of hell. You know, besides keeping you from transforming, Hang answered with a sigh. I can provide you with some painkillers in your meals. It'll still hurt, but it'll be better. What's the catch? Bertholdt asked cautiously. What do you want? I'd like to talk to you. We're supposed the same people. I want to understand how the outside world has pitted us against each other, Hang mused. But for the sake of that, I only want you to answer one question. Do that and I will take the pain away. What question? Bertholdt asked almost desperately. Why did you do all of this exactly? Hang asked curiously. I already told you, Dash. No, I mean you, Mr. Hoover, Hang interrupted, holding up her hands. I understand why you, the warriors, were sent here. But why did you become a warrior? Berthold was silent for a moment before answering, not just to her but to himself, because it seemed so long since he thought about home so clearly. We, Eldians? We're not treated well. Right? Hang acknowledged, letting him get it out at his own pace. My father is very sick. Even if we had the money, they probably wouldn't treat just any Eldian, Berthold answered softly. Becoming a warrior means our families are honorary Marlians. They get better treatment. Hang was silent for a long moment. Berthold swallowed. So, they turn children into weapons with the offer of better treatment for the families? Hang said somberly. I'm so sorry. Berthold didn't know what to say to that. Are you sure your father is even alive still? Hang asked with a raised eyebrow. Was the sickness that treatable? It's... Berthold paused and laughed. What is it? Hang asked in concern. I forgot the word to describe it. It's not something you can get rid of. It's not deadly if treated. You can live a long time with it. With treatment, Berthold repeated, more to himself than her. So he should be fine. Unless they think I'm dead. Hang furrowed her brow. Does death end the honorary status? Failure does, Berthold clarified. You're a good son, let no one make you think otherwise, Hang said with a nod. How many do you think are forced into trying to become warriors so their parents can have better lives? Most of them really, Berthold admitted, mind drifting to Annie and Reiner. Why couldn't you all just die? Hang ignored that while looking at Berthold's half-returned legs. I'll have food brought in for you with the medicine. You'll probably pass out before we take the legs again. Berthold opened his mouth but then closed it and gritted his teeth. Hang turned and left without another word. She took a deep breath as she exited the underground area, looking up at the night sky. He ready, Four Eyes? Levi asked, leaning against the wall next to the doorway. Hang didn't answer. You know he's the colossal titan. He kicked in Wall Maria's outer gate and his friend finished it off. Hundreds of thousands of people died because of him. Levi said nothing, letting him talk. I still feel like shit doing this all to him, Hang admitted soberly. Lady Frida wants us to keep him alive now for some reason instead of just taking his power. Levi nodded. They didn't know why, but they hadn't gone against it. Even if they wanted to, they'd need to feed him to a titan. Or maybe something similar. Hang, remind me to ask that woman a question next time we see her, Levi remarked. Oh. Hang looked at him curiously, but when he didn't elaborate, she let it go. I'll go feed the brat his medicine, Levi said, taking a tray of food and drink with him, generously laced with something to dull the pain. Meanwhile, I know you're here, Reiner. Annie? Eren stalked through the dark streets with a menacing pace to him. He smelled, looked, and just outright sensed for any sign of life. The city was greatly damaged and much of it was fresh. True, there was plenty of rot and overgrowth from years of abandonment. But the outright destruction, houses caved in or burned down. Much of that was more recent. As were the corpses. Some humans, Marlians no doubt. But also of crawlers. Not a lot of them, just a handful. But beneath all of that, Eren sensed life throughout the city near the center. Are they hiding in the buildings? If they are, why are they so spread out? Maybe we should find out? Ainz craned his head to look into the window of an attic. There was someone in there, he could sense as much. And they were alive. But they weren't moving. Not out of fear but just, not reacting. I don't like this. He subtly glanced around. Boris and Grice still hadn't revealed themselves or been spotted. Good. Let the enemy focus on him. He stopped suddenly, eyeing the corner of up head. I know you're there. I can smell you. Annie? With a lurch, he ran forward, heads craning around the corner. The lightning already came down as the female titan took form, but not before he caught Annie's shocked face. He didn't even give her time to finish transforming as his jaws found purchase in an arm, a leg, and her side. Annie reacted instantly and tried to break free, punching at his rightmost head to try and free her arm. But it was not enough as Eren lifted her up and slammed her down like a rag doll. With her stunned for a second, he pulled with his left head, biting harder until the leg was ripped off. The female titan let out a terrible scream of pain as Annie felt like her real leg was being torn away. Zeke scowled as he heard it. So, he really can inflict pain through the titan forms, he realized grimly. You're up now, Reiner? Annie hardened her nape and hands, trying to defend her real body. Eren responded by biting his middle head onto her own, while Dre went for the throat. Annie cursed as she felt the space within her titan growing cramped. At this rate, Eren would either crush her or rip her out through the front of the throat. Ainz opened his mouth to attack before jolting, turning his head around as he saw another titan running for him. The armored titan's fist connected with the reptilian skull, stunning his foe. Zwei released his grasp to roar and lunge at Reiner. But the warrior managed to avoid the bite, grabbing Annie and literally tearing her away from the final head. The front half of her was gone, but it would regenerate soon enough. Reiner tossed her away to buy her more time, rounding to face Eren. Damn it. Is he even bigger? Reiner asked himself in frustration as Eren rose to loom over him menacingly. I'm going to tear you apart. Reiner didn't understand Eren, but he got the intent. End of chapter. At the long-awaited return has come. God of Hate will return to bring monthly updates. I'm slightly rusty with this story, but I'm getting back into the groove very quickly. But yes, we open with a preemptive attack on Shiganshina while the warriors are dealing with the maddened kaiju shifters. Mikasa is dealing how she can and Bird is not having a good time. Happy Halloween. Grice kept his form low as he watched the battle between Eren and the warriors, if it could be called that. Grisha's son was handling them rather one-sidedly. Whatever attacks they got in either did little damage or Eren just shrugged it off. He chose not to enter the fray because he knew there was more going on here and wanted to figure out what. There was a lot of food in the area all over the city. That's what the beast, the crawler within him, was telling him. I wanted to go down there and start eating. But something about that was wrong to Grice. Why would the Marleyans stretch out their forces instead of defending one position? His former comrades, overtaken by their own crawlers and other beasts, would no doubt pick them off one by one. More to the point, was no one watching atop the wall? Something near it hides wheat near. Grice stopped suddenly, confused by the insistence of his crawler. Ah, you're actually clever. Grice heard the voice as clear as day and immediately leapt away. It was an instant too late as lightning shot down. Grice hissed violently as he felt his hardened skull and one of his limbs singled from the proximity to the transformation. He landed with one foot sliding over the edge. A small titan, the cart no doubt, leapt forward as Grice tried to catch his balance, and slammed its strangely shaped head into Grice's own. It did no damage on its own, but it did cause Grice to slip on his already treacherous footing. The two-limbed beast went tumbling over the side and falling to the city below. Eren looked away from his fight as he heard the sudden roar of his ally. Grice? Another shifter is here. A small one like Ymir? Those observations were cut short as Annie managed to graze the right eye of Ainz, making that head snarl in rage and pain, snapping towards the female titan. But Reiner tried to strike at Dre from the other side. The leftmost head dodged the strike, but narrowed his eyes as Reiner backpedaled before an attack even came. They're trying to distract us. It was an obvious thing. It was obvious neither titan could defeat Eren as the battle stood. So what was the plan? What were they waiting for? Another shifter getting into position? Some unknown weapon from Marley? Eren. The roar of Boris drew all eyes upwards. The warbat descended upon the battle, driving into the armored titan and slamming him into the ground. Eren moved to keep Annie away while Boris constricted his body around Reiner's titan form like a snake ensnaring its prey. We have company coming. Crawlers. Let's just take one of Theth's dogs and leave. Boris proposed forcefully. Eren nodded, deciding that was the best move for now. He let out a great roar. Grice. Retreat. With that order barked out, Eren turned to Boris again. Keep her busy. I can rip him out. Now. Needlessly to say, while Annie didn't know what was being said, she didn't like it. So with Eren distracted, she made a move to strike at him again. Boris, however, had already unfurled from Reiner's form and lunged towards Annie. The female titan, while having no idea what this creature even was, managed to pull off a spinning kick to the creature's head. It caused Boris to stumble in pain but was otherwise fine as he used his tail to try and attack her. Eren, meanwhile, immediately lunged at Reiner with renewed fury. No matter how Reiner tried to strike back, Eren's relentless three-headed assault continued. The golden dragon tried to break limbs, tear off armor, and dislocate limbs, all to try and dismember the armor titan and retrieve the shifter within. A great thunder erupted from overhead, signaling the transformation of another shifter. While the other two heads continued to attack Reiner, Zwei brought his head up and glared at the foe. A lanky armed titan covered in fur. Eren stiffened as he felt the hate and bloodlust of the storm spiking at the back of his mind. That was all the opening the beast titan needed to hurl his attack. Meanwhile, Historia sat across from Armin with a dour look on her face. And Armin couldn't blame her. I'm willing to lend an ear, but I'm not sure how much I can help, really, Armin said uncertainty. Historia nodded and sighed, taking a drink of her water. Just, Armin? How do you think you and Mikasa would feel if Eren had known about all of this? Being able to turn into this giant monster, maybe even about the outside world? What if he had known and kept it a secret from you both? That's hard to imagine, really, Armin said, scratching his cheek. Eren hiding a thing like that? I'm not sure he could have resisted trying to use that power for this long, let alone not tell us about it. Historia shrugged and nodded idly, conceding the unlikeliness of the scenario. But if he did? She prompted again. He'd have to have a very good reason for it all, if he wanted me to trust him again, Armin admitted with a smile. But that's the question, right? Do you think Ymir had a good reason to keep all of that from you? Of course she did. I mean, yeah, she could have just said she had a terminal illness, but that would have been suspicious for someone in the military and one as good as her, Historia reasoned with a sigh. Everything else? It was too dangerous for her to say anything. She had no idea Frida was changing things, let alone when that started. She had no reason to think anything good would happen if she revealed anything. She said she would though one day. My secret for hers. It was a promise. Despite her mixed emotions, Historia still smiled softly to herself at the memory they made together, the sun rising against the snow. Then can I ask what still bothers you? Is it this curse you mentioned? Armin asked delicately. The idea that the power of the Titans, the ability to shift into a Titan, came at a price made an uncomfortable amount of sense. Shifters could take on Titan forms and heal far beyond what humans could. Hence, they could only have the power for 13 years before dying. And that just begged the dark question, what was the price of Eren's power? Armin wanted to think that maybe it was just being unable to turn back into a human, but Eren's father had somehow done it. So if losing his human form wasn't the cost, what was? Maybe the answer to that too was something Grisha had left in the basement for Eren to find. Yes. No. Kind of. I meant, yes, I'm upset she's going to die in 8 years, but it's more than that, Historia said, rubbing her head as she struggled to make sense of it all. Armin, I have lived for so long just trying to live as someone who would be missed when she died. I thought that was the best fate I could have. To die in the military and be remembered fondly. Armin grimaced as he saw the truly tragic look of the girl behind the mask of the so-called goddess he and the others had adored for so long. To think someone had masked their personality to that point, just to present some idealized figure of goodness that everyone would look back fondly of. Not for gain or fame, but just to be remembered fondly with the expectation to die in the near future. That was such a sad goal, truly. But now that all this happened, I had no plan to die soon. I know death might come any day for any of us, but I wanted to live as long as I could, to the fullest I could. With Ymir and all of my friends. But just as I'm ready to commit to living, I find out she is going to die in less than 10 years, Historia admitted, looking down. It's like the universe decided to punish me for finally starting to dream and hope for a better future. The world is cruel but beautiful, Armin recited softly. That's something Mikasa says sometimes. She said that Eren helped her understand that. Though I can't see him ever saying something like that. Me either, Historia said, sharing a short chuckle with her fellow blonde. Cruel but beautiful? Let me ask you this. Do you still want to be with Ymir? Armin asked awkwardly. Or was this all too much? Historia was silent for a long moment as she contemplated this. Eventually, she'd have to accept a future without Ymir. But the idea of not spending the years Ymir had left together, to not fill that time with joy and memories for both of them? I know what I have to do, Historia said before looking outside and looking sheepish. But I should probably wait until tomorrow. I forgot how late it was. We should get to sleep. Yeah, we probably should, Armin agreed idly. Historia looked at him in consideration. Unless there is something you want to talk about as well, she offered in sympathy. Armin grimaced. Berthold, Reiner, and Annie. Traitors, I know. It's still so weird sometimes. I sometimes think about seeing how they're doing. Then I pause and remind myself that they're enemies now. I've lost people, we all have. I'm just not sure what hurts more. People you care about dying or this. It's like they were never real to begin with, Armin said with a sigh. Maybe they never were. Historia frowned. This whole situation is, well, fucked. Armin almost laughed at the curse, somehow both awkward and casual on Historia's lips. The whole world hates us? Monsters greater than Titans exist? Eren is one of them? Our friends are Titan-shifting traitors? And that's not even getting into everything regarding my sister, Historia said with a head shake. It all seemed to change so fast. We thought we knew how the world was, but then suddenly, we didn't. And that makes it all the scarier. I don't know if scarier is the word I'd use, Armin said softly. It's more like We had a map through a dangerous territory, now we find out that map was a fake. We're a bit lost, but I have to believe we're finding our way. Historia felt a bit better at that. Then she looked very grim. Eren is definitely going to try and fight Reiner and Annie. I don't think Grice would even want to stop him, Armin said with a headshake. Grice has been fighting against Marley since before we were born. You saw how he reacted to knowing that Frida would try to lead Eldia to victory against Marley. Historia recalled that rather vividly. The pleased growl, the angry warning if the vows took over Frida once more. Do you think they'll be fine out there? I can't do anything about that but hope so and plan for when they get back, Armin said with a headshake. But if I know Eren well? Historia nodded in understanding. Eren would be back, definitely. His new golden body reflected one key aspect of Eren's personality perfectly. That body, like Eren, was too stubborn to die. Meanwhile, Zeke wasn't sure what to expect when he realized he'd be staring down his half-brother, some form of golden dragon. A beast with 3 heads and green eyes shining malevolent. Eren Yeager. Just what was going through his head, Zeke wondered. Did Grisha ever tell this young man about the first family Grisha had and lost? Did Eren know anything true about the outside world? Zeke couldn't try and save him here, couldn't try to reach out to him. There were too many Marleyans about, too many ears that would think him a traitor for trying to bring this foe to their side. Could Eren ever turn back? Could any of them? Had Grisha condemned another son, this time to a fate of only living as a monster to be used as a weapon for Eldia? For right now it didn't matter. What mattered was keeping Eren from killing or stealing any more of their warriors. And the golden dragon was definitely still trying to rip Reiner out of his titan. Was it vengeance for Reiner's seeming betrayal, or pragmatism in thinking that the armored was the more important target? It didn't matter as Zeke continued his own assault. But this was not like the other monsters. His brother's scales were not just for looks. Zeke's hurled rubble left only minor marks. Only the eyes took significant damage and that had already healed. Perhaps a change of target was in order. Annie? Zeke yelled as he flung the next one towards the other fighter. Eren looked up in surprise, not expecting the voice from a titan of all things, and saw the stones coming towards the equally stunned Boris. Unlike Eren, Boris's hide was not so thick, deeper cuts forming in his body and holes ripped into his wings. Boris? I'm fine. Boris yelled as he sped behind Eren, reluctantly using the younger man as a shield. Eren, the wild ones will be here soon. We have to go. Eren growled down at Reiner. He could probably still get him, dead or alive, but he wasn't willing to risk Boris. Not right now. Even he knew the advantage of having an eye in the sky. Each of his heads looked towards a certain enemy. Eins to Annie, Dre to the Beast Titan, and Zwei to Reiner. Get ready to wrap around me. We might not kill them. But at least they'll have something to remember us by. Boris's eyes went wide as he saw the glow in Eren's throats. Zeke narrowed his eyes and tried to throw another strike before Eren could unleash this attack. But it was too late. From all 3 heads, beams of energy shot forth. Zeke couldn't help comparing it to the lightning that signaled a Titan transformation. The lightning-like energy tore through the rubble in midair, and Zeke brought up his Titan arms as it only barely missed him. Annie managed to dive behind a building and kept running as she heard and saw the attack still going, aiming towards her continuously. Reiner, however? Run! Peak yelled as she threw her Titan body in front of the attack meant for the armored Titan, the cart shifter expelling herself just before the attack could hit. The hell did she come from? Taking that opening, Reiner grabbed Peak in midair with his one good arm, the other healing after being mauled of armor and flesh, and managed to put some distance between Eren and himself. The attack ended and Eren felt Boris wrap around him like a serpent. While unsatisfied with how this turned out, Eren merely growled in triple as he turned to make his own escape. No. Eren felt time slow, feeling the full weight of the storm's attention on him. A kill? The image of the furred beast Titan came to his mind unbidden, along with a wave of hate that was not Eren's own. Now. The instant stretched on for eternity, as Eren felt every urge to rush back and destroy this new foe. Eren! Grice yelled from atop the wall again. Get Boris out of there. It's a trap. That was all the prompting Eren needed to know what he had to do. No. Eren could feel the fury aimed at himself even as he ignored the storm and kept on running to the exit. Why is he worried about me and not you? Boris wondered with a frown, looking back at their foes. The shifters weren't chasing them, but they could hear it. The roaring and howling from the other end of the city. The crawlers were here. Still, Eren couldn't help wondering, Just what about this new foe garnered such rage from the monster in his own body? Of course, he couldn't dwell on that for long as he heard another roar. No, not a roar, this was a shout, a scream from the beast titan. Just like that, Shiganshina was filled with lightning and explosions. End of chapter. Well, Eren and company more or less won the fight, but couldn't finish anyone off. At the same time, well, Zeke had to reveal his trump card to deal with the rabid monsters Grice's comrades became. Armin and Historia had a little talk as Historia is still working things out about Ymir, and is resolved that they will work out. Historia just had a lot more dumped on her all at once in this timeline compared to canon. Happy Thanksgiving, Zeke! Peak exclaimed as she leaped onto a building near the beast titan. They're coming. Zeke nodded. They'd have to let Eren and his comrades escape this time, the golden dragon already charging for the exit with the flying serpent wrapped around him. Luckily, Annie and Reiner remembered the plan and were cautiously making a run to Zeke's location. He looked to the south and saw their true target. Not just the crawling beast that had been harrying them insistently, but also something else. Something new. The tusk hounds the others had taken to calling them. Giant monsters with the likeness of canines, but with tusk-like fangs that reminded more than a few of warthogs. Zeke had only seen them a couple times. But now as he watched several charging into the city while crawlers roamed over the top, he wondered if these monsters were not as wild and savage as he thought. Had these two separate kinds of beasts joined against them somehow? Some form of mutual alliance against a shared enemy? Were they intelligent enough for that? It didn't matter, not really. He waited until they got closer. The crawlers leaped across buildings, the hounds racing through the streets, both with fangs bared to rip into their prey. He waited until he was sure it was the best chance, to potentially take all of them out at once. He waited until now and gave a great roar of a shout. It echoed over the city, and within many buildings, a glow started to form and lightning rained down from the skies. There had been a number of expendable Eldians brought along with this mission, those drugged up and ready to have some of Zeke's spinal fluid fed to them. There had been plans to make use of a gas containing the same, to use on the Eldians of Paradis, but given the current situation that hadn't been an option. Zeke wasn't sure why he had requested the extra bodies. It felt like a whim made out of caution at the time. But still, it was fortunate he had. The crawlers and hounds were soon howling and screeching in pain from being caught in the explosions of the transformation. As they struggled to rise from their injuries, they were swarmed by the newly transferred pure titans that were trying to rip apart and devour them at Zeke's command. The crawlers and the hounds were superior creatures to titans in many ways, but even that could be overcome with enough titans in sheer numbers. The Marlians cheered inside the fortress as they saw the monsters destroying each other. Don't let your guard down, Peak warned cautiously. She is right, Zeke said, watching as the monsters tried to fight the titans off. They were wounded, some dead or dying, but they still posed a potential threat. Reiner, you're with me. We will finish them off while Annie and Peak guard this location. The warriors took a breath and readied themselves, hoping this would be the end of this particular problem. Hopefully they could focus on the Eren problem after this. Meanwhile, the whelp. Eren gritted every set of his teeth as the wrathful word echoed in his head, along with the image of that furry titan. The voice of the storm really wanted that one dead for some reason. He didn't know why. Did it know that shifters could make titans emerge like that? How did it do that exactly? And why would the voice care? Titans or Eldians? The people in the building. The enemy had a lot of Eldians set up as a trap and transformed them all at once with that roar, somehow. So they just forced a bunch of people into being titans, right then? Those bastards. Eren, calm down, Boris requested, still wrapped around the reptilian giant as they ventured further north. We'll figure this out, but we need to find Grix first. He was right, Eren knew he was, but that didn't stop him from feeling pissed off at the situation. The voice of the storm definitely wasn't helping. At least we know they can do that. Yeah, that is a new trick, Boris agreed with a headshake. I've never heard of shifters being able to do that. The founder is the only one that SSS supposes to be able to control the pure titans. Eren nodded, filing that away for questioning later as his three heads looked around with concern. Where was Grice? He should have found them by now. He didn't get caught back there, did he? Wait, is that him? Boris spoke up as he partially unwound from Eren, looking back towards Wall Maria. Where? I don't see him. There on the left. That will never not be strange, Boris murmured as they looked towards the wall, east of Shiganshina. It was hard to make out in the night, but there was a large figure on there, a crawler. One that it wasn't coming down for some reason. You can't fly right now, right? Boris removed himself from Eren's person entirely, slithering on the ground like a snake as he unfolded his wings to examine the damage. They'll heal, but I'm grounded for a day, maybe 3. So they all had some manner of healing factor, but Eren had yet to see one as good as his own. The enemy should be too busy to be watching that far down. Let's go see if it's him. The duo walked cautiously and made their way to the wall, watching the crawler as it prodded along the battlements. Eren. Boris. Grice called down as they got close. Boris, please tell me you can still fly? Sorry, my wings are ripped up right now, Boris apologized, tilting his serpentine head up at the crawler. Why, are you hurt? No, but I found a friend. Grice called down, looking to the side. Cautiously, a wart dog came to the edge and peeked down. Hello. Eren blinked at the feminine voice from the creature. Ellie? You're alive? Insane? Boris exclaimed in surprise. Yes, long story, but can we just focus on me getting down? Ellie requested pleadingly. Is she scared of heights? Hello. You must be Grisha's son, Eren? Ellie greeted nervously. And yes, I am. How did she even get up there? I dragged her up before the Titans and Shifters could get to her, Grice answered. Look, just help me get her down. We can't exactly catch her. We only have our fangs. Ein snapped his jaw for emphasis. I know you're scared, but that fall won't kill you, Boris pointed out helpfully. That doesn't help me. Ellie yelled back down. A giant dog with a fear of heights. Eren knew his life had been strange since he transformed, but little things like this still weirded him out somehow. Meanwhile, Jean yawned deeply as he and Marco stood watch outside a home in Trost. We still have people wanting to try and find things to salvage from here? Jean asked groggily. It's not like there is much else they can do, Jean, Marco said sympathetically. A lot of people have no place else to go. I know that. I just thought they all came and sifted through everything already, that we were finished with these trips, Jean remarked idly. Then again, I'm sure a few of them ran for Walsena before hearing the news. Just about, actually, a voice admitted as a young man stepped out of the door, carrying a cloth bag that was only halfway filled. Sorry, sir, I didn't mean anything by that, Jean apologized, grimacing at being overheard. It's fine, the man said with a sigh. The place was pretty well picked clean. Someone must have been dumb and lucky enough to loot the place before getting out of Trost. Jean and Marco shared a look. There had been an issue with people pretending an address was their own to loot the place. It was entirely likely the military had unknowingly let someone pick this man's home clean. But telling him that wouldn't help anyone at this point, so neither said a word. The man was too busy looking at the damage around the street to notice their silent exchange. The bent wooden walls, the giant footprints, the caved-in building across the road. So, the Rumos or whatever you call the big creatures, they're not here right now? He asked in surprise. Yeah. They're outside, stretching their limbs, Jean answered as it was the official cover story. Among other things. The man nodded absently, hesitating for a moment. Is it true, the rumors? The Golden Beast was a human before he turned into that, somehow? We're not allowed to talk about them currently, sir, Marco answered reluctantly. Plenty of soldiers had heard Eren's name used a few times during the battle against the Shifters, and it didn't take long for the idea that the Golden Beast was something similar to the Titan Shifters to spread among the people. It was already a theory in more than one of the newspapers. The soldiers don't bother denying that these Shifters exist, these people that can turn into Titans. Why hide anything about these creatures? The man asked with a frown. Jean sighed, rubbing the back of his head. Honest truth? They're still trying to piece together what they know, what it means, and how to tell people, he answered casually. From where I stood, they were more worried about routing out the Shifters infiltrating us than they were about the clearly friendly bastard in gold that helped us deal with the Colossal. The man stood there for a moment before nodding. I suppose that makes sense. It's just so confusing and scary. I'm just glad humanity finally has some allies in this insanity. Marco and Jean deliberately didn't respond to that as the man put the bag over his shoulder. You ready to head back, sir? Marco offered, getting a nod. Come on, we'll dash. They paused as they heard a pop in the air, looking up to see a green smoke flare from on the wall, above the blocked-off hole. That means they're back, Jean remarked, nodding to his friend. Marco, escort him out while I go take a look. I don't suppose I can stay and see them? The man asked with a chuckle. Sorry, Marco said with a friendly smile. It's very unlikely, but it's a precaution in case abnormal Titans rush into the city before the boulder is put back in place. The man shivered at that. That is all you had to say to get me moving, soldier? I'm glad I live near the wall now. Jean was already taking off on his ODM gear, heading for the boulder as the other members of the Reason Walk began to gather. Welcome back, handsome. Among others, like Hang, who was waving up at Grice as the crawler slid down the side of the wall. Whereas others stepped back instinctively when Grice landed, Hang just smiled wider. Grice, however, didn't retort to the greeting. He just grumbled a bit to himself as he moved to the boulder. It was only now that Jean noticed the bloody wounds on Grice's arm and the scorch mark along his hard skull. It didn't go well, I take it? Hang asked knowingly. Hey, Grice? You okay? Jean called up with a frown. I'm fine, Grice answered, and it was obvious he was lying. The boulder started to shift and Jean could hear the growls and muffled roars of Eren's head. Look, we brought back some of my comrades. We're not in the best shape, so tone it down, giant fetishist. Hang grew silent and observant as Grice helped Eren push the boulder aside. The golden giant trotted through and, instantly, Hang inhaled and nearly bit her tongue as she laid eyes on the two newcomers, resisting the urge to ask a million questions. Jean wasn't sure what to make of them. One was some kind of giant snake that slithered in through the hole, with the other was something more akin to a dog with overgrown teeth. Neither of them looked to be in a happy mood, their eyes somber and sad. So, can any of them talk to like you? Connie of all people asked, breaking the silence as the two new monsters looked around curiously while Eren put the boulder back in place. No, that's just a crawler benefit, Grice answered, pointing his snout at each of them. This is Boris. And the other is Ellie. That dog is a girl? Sasha asked in surprise. I wonder if the guys like her have bigger tusks? Wow, they are really calm about this, Ellie said in surprise as she studied the humans around her. Well, they have been living with Eren and Grix for a little bit. I don't think we compare much to that, Boris mused calmly. I wonder if Historia can understand them too. Hang remarked, tapping her cheek in thought. Where is she anyway? With Ymir, probably. Armin went to look for her when he saw we had new arrivals, Mikasa said as she landed nearby. Eren. The three heads nodded in greeting, but not even Ainz could give more of a greeting than that. Did something go wrong? Mikasa asked in concern, looking them all over. Grice growled a bit, sitting down a bit to rest his injured arm. On the way back we ran into some of my other comrades. The ones who lost their minds, he remarked grimly. They took us by surprise. Eren killed one of them while I and Boris dealt with the other. I'm sorry, Ellie whimpered sadly. No one is blaming you, Ellie, Boris promised as he coiled up to her side. I thought for sure they were still there mentally, Ellie murmured with a troubled look. Well, they weren't. Grice snapped in frustration, making Ellie wince and whine. They're gone. Just like the rest of them. Boris hissed and glared at Grice. Leave her be, Grix. Sheesh did nothing wrong. Boris defended hotly. Please don't fight about this. Ellie pleaded apologetically. Oh boy. Are they about to start fighting? Connie asked in concern, the other watching the exchange cautiously. Settle down, all of you. The monster trio looked to Eren, who wasn't gazing at them at all. His eyes stared across the buildings to the north, watching a figure approaching with ODM gear. Commander Erwin is coming. Meanwhile, being the official queen was a lot different from being the hidden queen. Frida didn't truly appreciate that until after she had stepped out of the shadows and taken the throne. Before, she was just another noble and a rather low-key one as far as most people knew. Now, it was already hectic enough trying to covertly and overtly restructure the government into something that could strive for a future beyond the walls that her craven ancestor had pinned them within. If she wasn't getting petitions, complaints, and inquiries, she was getting suitors and marriage requests. Her scared arm managed to unnerve most enough for her to politely decline or rebuff. And all of that under the threat of a larger, much more ancient threat than men or titans looming over her. Sitting behind her desk, signing a document, Frida winced as she felt a phantom pain in her arm as a reptilian roar echoed in her memories. Frida, you all right? Kenny asked, leaning against the door. She raised an eyebrow. How long have you been there? She questioned. Long enough, Kenny answered. Old wounds acting up? It's nothing, Frida promised. What brings you here? Yeah, about that. It might not be nothing, Kenny said meaningfully. Frida narrowed her eyes as she rose and followed him out the door, heading to a place only very few knew. The real reason why she still lived at the Rice Manor instead of the capital. In the crystalline walls of the underground chapel, Frida tried to ignore the scenes from her memories. Of her parents and siblings slaughtered by the golden form of Grisha, of being torn from her titan like she was mere prey, and of the burning sensation in her arm. She ignored this all as she reached near the back, where the crystals became jagged as they jutted out of the floor and wall. Unlike the rest of the cavern, which was shining and blue, these glowed with a soft white light. How long have they been like this? Frida asked with a frown. Caven found some putting on the light about an hour ago, Kenny answered with a grunt. Now the entire wall is brightening up the whole place. A bit of an exaggeration, but Frida didn't disagree all the same as she gently placed a hand on one of the shards. There was a long silence until she finally removed her hand. Bad news? Kenny asked expectantly. Possibly not, Frida answered as she turned to look at him. Though, I think I will be taking a trip soon. What for? Kenny questioned with a raised eyebrow. Let's just say the Queen may need to make an appearance. End of chapter. Well, there went the first skirmish, Zeke leading the warriors. On one hand, Eren and company didn't manage to kill any of the warriors. On the other, they go another ally and they know about Zeke's power to transform and control titans. Meanwhile, Frida is up to something. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share and donate for more videos.